Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 441. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. Sean can't believe I just threw out a Fawn Leibowitz reference. So says the sensei of the whatnot, Segulin, elder statesman of the podcast, and the Duke of You Know.
How's it going, eh?
On this episode, we're going to be talking about Prez number 2, We Are Robin number 2, Cyborg 1, Superman 42, Batgirl 42, and the Batgirl Annual number 3. And to understand the reference that we're talking about, I was stumbling as we first did the opening, and I said a DC Fawn podcast or something like that, and Jim Olsen ran another Fawn Leibowitz. So at the time, it was kind of a very random reference that Jim threw out, and that's where that came from. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the InfiniteComics.com podcast partnership. Sponsoring us this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Jim, what is going on at DCBService.com?
Well, as always, we got wonderful bundles. 50% off when you get a bundle pack of some of the new series. They've got new series 1 bundle, new series 2 bundle, returning series bundles, all of them 50% off. But there is a special bundle that I must bring up. It is the Vertigo bundle. 4 new Vertigo titles, all 4 of them 75% off. Regular price would be $16.96. You get them for only $4.21. Twilight Children, Survivors Club, Clean Room, written by Gail Simone, and Art Ops. All of them bundled together, 75% off. Outstanding. Thank you, DCBS.
Why wouldn't you try them for $4?
I know.
I mean, that's really cool. I like when they do those deals. It's a great way to get people on there. You know what's good about them? They usually continue to offer similar bundles for a couple months afterwards, at least 50% off, to try and let people have an opportunity to see if they enjoy the book and which ones they want to keep out of the batch. So I like when they do that over at DCBService.com. Remember, they're a digital partner. Whether you do Comixology or My Digital Comics, link those accounts to your DCB Service accounts. And remember to shop through their portal, because then you get credit of 5% of those purchases towards your DCB service order. And we always have links on our show website right to their website, so please consider clicking on those and heading straight over. Over at InStockTrades.com, they have a lot of deals, and this week's Deals of the Weeks, they have the Infinite Crisis Fight for the Multiverse trade paperback, 50% off, only $7.49. Teen Titans trade paperback, Volume 1, Blinded by the Lights, 50% off, only $8.49. I'm going to shout this one out. It's a Marvel one. It's the Power Man and Iron Fist Epic Collection. And it's a trade paperback. It's 50% off, only $19.99. Collects major issues from the run of first Power Man and then leading right into Power Man and Iron Fist, that series. I was a big fan of that growing up, so I just wanted to shout it out just because it's really good material. Green Lantern by Jeff Johns. The omnibus hardcover is one of the top sellers this week. It's the Volume 2 hardcover. It's 42% off, only $57.99. And I want to shout that one out because that Green Lantern work was absolutely outstanding. And those omnibuses are a great way to get that material, especially if you're newer to the Green Lantern universe and you wanted to catch up on some of that. That's over at InStockTrades.com. Check them out every week to see the amazing deals they're offering for you. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics we're discussing on today's show. So, if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some comics.
Calling a donut.
Jim, our first discussion this episode, we're going to jump to We Are Robin number 2. Lee Bermejo's on the story, Jorge Corona on the art, Rob Haynes on the breakdown, Trish Mulvihill on colors. It's Khary, I think Carrie Randolph, epilogue art, Emilio Lopez, epilogue colors, Jared K. Fletcher on letters, Lee Bermejo on the cover, James Harvey on the variant cover, Rebecca Taylor, associate editor, Mark Doyle, editor, Batman, of course, created by Bob Kane. Now, this was an interesting book because from issue 1, you and I were already speculating, as I'm sure everybody else was, on who the mysterious stranger is that's watching them. And we were wondering, good guy, bad guy. I think we both threw out at one point in time Alfred. With issue 2, it's Alfred. I mean, there's no gray area on that. That is Alfred, especially the bit when he's getting out of the car. You kind of see both both hands sort of there, but in sequence when he had him in what Duke thought was the interrogation room, he kept having the one hand behind the back.
Yeah.
And the whole dress up, and he's thin and all that. I already was digging this book in its concept before this. This issue turned into a home run I'm really into We Are Robin as a title with issue number 2.
Yeah. I was, when I'm reading this, I was sitting there and the very first image of him, I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, can't be Bruce. Way too thin. Then I'm going through, and it's funny. I didn't notice the arm behind the back until my probably my third read through. Is when I really noticed. Oh wow, he's hiding his hand. I wonder why. But when you start looking at him, that was the first. You really see, especially just the slender face and just it's got to be Alfred. There's no ifs, ands, or buts in my mind. If this was anybody other than Alfred, I would be shocked.
Oh yeah, at this point, and I think the dress up and the fact that everybody who's seen him, as is referenced in the book, all the new Robins, have seen the same guy, but in different places with different disguises.
Yeah,
different variations of him. It so fits Alfred's background. I think this is really a great use for him. He was one. I guess I was so caught up in what was going on with Gordon and Bruce. I hadn't really thought, and the fact that we've seen Alfred's daughter, I hadn't really given a lot of thought, like, what are they going to do with Alfred during this time frame? Well, we got our answer right now.
Yeah. And it's weird because in a little bit I am surprised that Alfred's doing this because he's always, to me, seemed like the guy who wishes Bruce didn't do this, wishes Bruce had a normal life and all that. And so for him to go and start recruiting these other people and to bring them into the to bring them into this crazy world, I'm a little bit surprised. But on the other hand, I'm seeing him bring in a team to support each other. He's providing them with the support. He's pulling in the different people. So I kind of can see and understand why he would, because he's not just recruiting one person. He's recruiting a team to do this task.
I don't
a
know
task that Bruce would have
them.
done by himself.
I don't know that he's recruiting them. You're right with how you're looking at the recruit. He's pulling these people in, but let me clarify that because I think your point's right. Recruiting is the right word, but it's the recruits that he's choosing. They're already in the mix. And I think that's what he's seeing. These are people who, in isolation, are doing things on their own already. They're caught up in this mess. Duke, for example, he's going after his parents. That's going to happen no matter what Alfred does. Alfred leaves him be. He's still on that path. He brings him in with this group. He's got a fighting chance. I think each member of the team is being brought in because, similar to Duke, the city's called on them. And I think issue 1 referenced this when he was talking about how, before there was, Batman was like kind of this agent of the dark that called upon himself to do this. But now the city has called upon certain people, and they're people who are out in the light, with the colors, and that's the whole movement concept of We Are Robin that he's talking about. So your point is correct. I shouldn't sound like I'm disputing because I'm not. He is recruiting them, but he's picking people who are already in the mix, who've already been called upon because of circumstance. To your point, putting them together as a team gives them all a fighting chance to actually accomplish not only their own goals, but goals that will help the city. They're already there. They're in the mix. These are people that are already going to be doing this, maybe from his time in Batman, and to what you and I both love. You love it in Green Arrow, you love it in Batman 2, and I love it as well. The Team Batman concept is driving this. So he's helping them. He brought Duke in and said, listen, I'll help you find your parents, but you need to help me with this mission first, and really pulling them together as a group and as a team and guiding them as the nest, so to speak, the Robin's nest. It's a very cool concept. So I think that's why it works. And I think it's an important distinction because, yes, everything you're saying is valid. Alfred does fight against that. But I think in this case, he's realized, I can ignore this, but that's just as bad. I know these kids are out there doing this stuff. Do I ignore it, stay on the sidelines and do nothing? Or do I help give them a real fighting chance to make this work? And I think that's his thinking, and that's what's making this book work for me, and that's why there's nobody else that this is. That's totally Alfred.
Yeah, we're both on agreement on that. But here's something interesting I just noticed. Mm-hmm. I just noticed it as you were talking. We do get to see the hand behind his back in one of the images during the interrogation. We're seeing it through the glass window, and you can see he clearly has a hand there.
Nope. It's a mirror image. Take a look in the previous panel above that where the coffee cup is, because I looked for the same thing.
Oh, okay.
The coffee cup's in the other hand, the one that's always been facing us all along.
No. Flip the page.
Okay.
You'll see it right there. And maybe it is another mirror image, or it's somebody else looking through the mirror. But you can clearly see the hand behind his back. You help me handle the bomb situation, I help you find your parents. Right as he's telling him that, you look at the image. You can see the one hand that's behind his back is right there.
Oh, yeah.
I just noticed it as we were talking right now.
I didn't see that. No, you're right. Thank you. Interesting.
But again, he is Alfred.
Well, but here's the thing. Do we know that's a hand?
Right. It could very easily be a prosthetic. It could be, hey, he's on first name basis with Victor Stone. He can have a cybernetic hand, you know?
Yeah. I don't
easily. So, yeah. But I'm still convinced that this is Alfred.
Oh, you're 100% correct, though. It's right there. So I don't know what that is. That's not the hand that he's been using, though, I don't think.
No, that's the hand that's been behind his back the whole time.
Well, yeah. Ooh. But was he using it with the coffee cup earlier? Was that then not a mirror image? Because now I don't know that was a mirror image that I saw. He could have put the coffee cup in his other hand at that point. Although, why would you do that? Who does that? People don't usually switch their coffee cup between multiple hands in a short time frame. I don't know. That's got me more intrigued. I want to know what's going on with his hand. Still convinced it's Alfred.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This hasn't changed any convincing on my part. It's still Alfred.
Now, here's the interesting thing. Let's talk about this group of kids and their motivations. You know, like a short amount of time has clearly passed because we had that happening in the city with the Joker. And because of that, there is a certain amount of, I don't want to say chaos in the city, but there's a certain amount, well, again, as with anything that happens in Gotham that's a big event, it does lead to uprisings and situations. You got the below ground, the city, this the homeless group, which I wonder if they're comprised of some people who maybe have been affected by what happened with Joker. And they were pulled underground. Because there's a lot of missing people still in Gotham who have not come back from all of that. So are some of them that. But this guy, the voice of, you know, the homeless army that's growing, is driven by some mysterious cloaked person. Do we know who that is? Any guesses who you think that might be? Because all we see is him in a big, huge cloak. And I'm wondering who that could be.
The only thing could it be, Deacon, the Blackfire? Could it be? There's all the different Bat villains run through my head that have had this MO of the uprising of the homeless and the gathering of the masses. Now, I don't know. And that's, I think, one of the neat things, that we do have this mysterious figure that the rat face, minister is, the figurehead leader is not only going to, but bowing to him. And you have the people in the shadows looking and following him. There's some agent of the Robin team of Alfred, observing this guy, from the shadows. And again, whenever I see somebody observing from the shadows with his face covered, I'm wondering, is Bruce operating down there? And that's why he's letting Gordon handle the top side. Is he, down there? Is this all a giant ruse of Bruce Wayne? And is that how Bruce is going to come back into the picture? Because you've got this other person following him, gathering the information, gathering the data on this guy and on the leader. My first thought is always Bruce Wayne, but I don't know.
Now, Rico, I think it's Rico, the one that they call Hermione that was up on top of the lights.
Yeah.
She was searching through her pack, and I know I have it in here. She told me to pack it. And is she a little off? Does she have an imaginary friend? What's going on there? I was wondering, I like this team. I like that I don't know much about them. These are really, to me, all fresh new characters. I like the balance of male and female characters. I like that some of them are more confident and competent than the others. And they tend to defer to certain characters, as Izzy, for example, tends to be, I think, much more in a leadership role of the team They tend to defer to her, and she's a martial artist and everything I like in a strong female character. She got a little bit of an attitude, but yet, they all clearly toe the line, but she's not bossy. She's a good, inspirational leader. I really like that. I love the costume scheme, like how in today's society, when you think of teens, they all have their own dress sense. I mean, we did back in the day, too. We all had our certain things, certain variations on whatever was current style or being out of current style that we had, whatever you want to. We all had our own thing. I like that as each of them seem to adopt their new Robin garb, it matches their style. I prefer that to them having I was a big fan of the classic X-Men, and I liked that they had their own. The original X-Men, I'm going back to Cyclops and Marvel Girl and Beast and all that. I like how they had their own set costumes, and when New Mutants came out, they did too. It was the same team costume, and I do like that, don't get me wrong. But today's teens, in particular, with self-expression being so driven by how you dress, it matches this, and this feels very contemporary by the way that they dress in their outfits. And I like that if it's Alfred, which we're assuming it is, I like that Alfred's not fighting against that. And I think we've seen this a lot more with Damian, for example. Damian's done his own variation on the Robin costume that's very Damian, if that makes sense. Do you like that? I mean, I know you are very much a more regimented team person. How do you feel about it in this book?
Well, with superheroes and things like that, I like the little personal touches and the variations on, like the Green Lantern Corps. I think they've got that down where they've got the base uniform when you're a recruit, but when you become a full Lantern, you're modifying it to your personality. You're modifying it to how it better fits you and, works with your, various alien races and whatnot. So I do like that with a superhero team. If this was more of a governmental regiment, then of course you want uniform because that helps toward, that's the mindset, helps you when you get everybody in the line, everybody in groove, it's, things move a little bit smoother. But when you're dealing with the vigilante side, you need to have it personalized. You need to have it where they feel comfortable wearing it. Now, the one thing that I would recommend to all of them are masks to cover their identity and helmets. Yes. We've seen a couple of them take some bumps, and I'll tell you, if I were to become a vigilante, I would have a Kevlar vest, and a helmet, just because, just in this one issue alone, we had two of them get dropped by bricks to the head. When you're dealing with this type of crazies, guess what? You got to have a little bit of armor and a little bit of protection for yourself.
Yeah, it is. One of the things I'm digging about this book is it does feel like we're growing along with the characters. Like, I want to see things like that evolve in this title. I like, as you were saying all that, I was nodding. I'm like, yes, I want to see all that. But I think these are things that the kids need to learn along the way. Yeah. I think that Alfred is going to be a source of providing that because he already has an arsenal for them, an armory. Yeah. He had a door that he opened up and there's a whole closet there. The problem is his resources are probably pretty limited right now because of what happened with Wayne.
See, I still think their resources aren't that limited because the whole Bat finances, yes, it was a derivative from Wayne Tech, but it was its own separate entity. Bruce Wayne probably was one of those guys who on books was, $7 billion, but in reality he was like 20 billion because most of the money was set aside and hidden, and the various shell companies and whatnot that were funding Batman Inc. and funding the Batman Project and everything that he had. But I don't think I think now, tech-wise, maybe there's limitations because he can't go to Wayne Tech anymore. Mm-hmm. But the financial resources to develop this stuff, I think, are still there.
They do have the potential to have helmets, Jim. It's in that armory in the end of the first issue.
Yeah. There's
all kinds of helmets and different things outlined up there, so there is a potential for that. I'm going to be very curious to see what route that goes with it. How are you digging this book, though? I mean, as far as for me, I really enjoyed issue 1. I wasn't at the point where I'm like, wow, this is great with issue 1. Issue 2, with all the reveals in there, and I do want to say it's not just Alfred that's doing it for me. Like, I'm loving following Duke and what's going on there. But actually, Izzy and the whole gang, I'm enjoying them too, especially now that it's starting to come together. This feels like a great, like, issue 1 to me was a great prologue. Issue 2 was really chapter 1 and the kickoff for me.
Yeah.
And where I feel like, oh, I'm getting to the meat and potatoes of this now. I want to see the movement that's going on here. These are kids who, they've all got a stake in what's going on in the city right now. I want to learn what each of those stakes are, how they help each other, how they band together as a team, and how they gradually become friends. Because Duke references, I've got friends now, but I mean, they aren't really there yet. That's something that builds over time. They've got a common interest that I think is bringing them together, which is where great friendships begin. I want to see the friendships develop, and I actually care about seeing where the friendships develop, which is hard to do in 2 issues.
Yeah, this is definitely doing a great job of just building and getting me into it. Like what you said with issue 1, I thought it was good, but I wasn't like oh my god, this is the greatest. It was a what's going to happen by the end of issue 2. I'm definitely in the groove with this. I really dig Hermione. I'm hoping her quote unquote imaginary friend is in reality Batgirl. I would love to see that there's other members of the Bat family actually helping out this team. I think that would be a neat little twist that would come out of nowhere. Or if not, Batgirl, maybe spoiler or some. There's a lot of females that could potentially be her imaginary friend, and actually getting her hardware and equipment and helping her out. But in the end, when I'm initially reading it, I was thinking she's just a little bit off kilter. She's just just a little bit out there. And to be honest, you kind of need to have that a little bit to do this type of stuff. So she's a character I'm definitely interested in. I want to see where Duke goes and how his continuing development, and just as you said with Izzy, I really dig that her leadership styles and just that upfront. So I'm getting used to these guys. I'm getting accustomed to them. I'm liking what I'm seeing, and there's a lot of potential future. And as I said, I'm wondering if we've got Alfred connected, do we also have Bruce connected to this?
No.
Are we going to get a Bruce Wayne appearance in this?
No. Well, that I think might happen, but I don't think Bruce is connected. I think Bruce is on the shelf. I don't think Bruce either is motivated because of what happened to him or knows because of what happened to him. There's 2 different pieces of the puzzle. Here's the thing. That issue of Batman that's coming up, we saw at the end where Gordon was talking to Bruce and introducing himself as Batman. Bruce's reaction to that's going to be huge. Because I think we want to know, what does he know? I don't know. I'm not convinced that Bruce knows.
Again, I agree. And it's in the epilogue, that scene, that one scene where you've got that, as I said, you've got that masked figure following Ratface. It's not masked really, but he is. He's covering his face. He's hiding in the shadows. He's gathering intel on this guy. He could be part of the We Are Robin program, but part of my gut is telling me that's Bruce Wayne. And the connection with him and the homeless is he was working in those homeless shelters.
That's
He's
Alfred.
doing all that kind of stuff. And it's
that's Alfred.
You think that's Alfred?
The guy you're talking about, the guy who's like doing the bat and all that. That was Alfred.
Really?
Yes, that's the thin guy that's been leading them all along. You're talking about the one with the bat camera.
Yeah,
that's Alfred. That's not Bruce. That's Alfred.
You sure?
Yeah, the guy who's wrapped up there. That's Alfred.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I think.
Yeah, okay. Part of me was hoping that was Bruce.
Because if you take a look at the end of issue 1, the epilogue of issue 1, well, I could go either way on it. And this might be an issue of there being 2 different art teams that's making it confusing. I guess I could kind of see your point there, too. Ooh. It just... Ooh.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Ooh. I guess looking at the eyes and stuff, I kind of see the point. I don't know if it's Alfred in disguise, though, or... Ooh. I don't know. Or is that a third player in the game?
See,
I'm going with my number one guess in that one is that's Alfred, but oof. It is a different art team in the epilogue. So I don't know if that's what's driving, the difference of the look. I'm intrigued. I'm going to take it back. I don't know 100% that I completely disagree with you. I thought it was our guy infiltrating. It's the shark I'm searching for. Wow. And is that perhaps why Bruce has stayed underground? I don't know. Is that one of the reasons why he's staying what he is right now? I don't know. I'm going to take it back. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, because this was my mindset with this.
Okay.
you think about Bruce Wayne's working in the homeless shelter. He's allowing Gordon to be Batman. He's allowing all that stuff. And so he's focusing on the part that he wouldn't have been able to do if he was doing the Bat missions now. He's recognizing that there is there's this problem on the ground that's got to be dealt with. And he's like, up top's got everything covered. He's got Julia watching Gordon's back. He's got Alfred taking care of the kids. So this is something he can go and he can get intel. But in the epilogue of the first issue, I was thinking that when I reread that with what we know now, I'm thinking, okay, that was Alfred.
But look at
looking on the back camera.
Look at that epilogue again.
Yeah.
And when you see the door shut, it's the same guy. If you take a look at that last page there, the last portion of it, it's actually the same guy. Because you take a look at his eyes and everything.
Yeah.
Because the art changes there too. It's a different art team on the epilogue than the rest of the issue. But if you take a look at the guy with the hand when he's in there, the hat that he's wearing right now, that's him.
Oh, okay.
So if you take a look at the last page of issue 1, where he's like going through those who won't predict the future, or those whose past won't predict the future, that segment, you see the hat there. Then if you go down, it's a place of color, and you see that little panel there, and you see him with his hand going through. He's wearing the same hat that we see at the end of... And the eyes even look the same. Like, that's the same guy. So I don't know. To your point, I'm not going to say that isn't Bruce, because I can see where you're getting that from. And I don't know that I disagree that isn't a possibility. I also wonder if it's not a third player.
See, I don't think it's a third player.
Yeah, it's either Alfred or Bruce.
I'm leaning more towards Alfred now, that he's doing, but that's him doing this, because this figure is definitely doing with the recruiting, and if we're convinced that Alfred is the other guy, I'm thinking this is all Alfred doing this. Mm-hmm. And maybe Bruce is completely off the shelf right now. Maybe he doesn't even know who or what he was or what he is.
I don't know. There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of unknowns here, and I think that's part of the coolness that with this We Are Robin book, that we're seeing this. It's not just when I first started thinking about this, I'm thinking, okay, it's a bunch of kids, they're doing this. Now we're seeing, no, there's definitely a back connection here. And we're going to, as later issues go down the line, we're going to get a heavier connection. And the Comic-Con, they announced that Damien's going to have some issues with these kids. And Damien, down the line, we're going to get Damien interacting with them. And that's going to lead to a whole, what's going to happen there? So I don't know. I'm definitely into this book and into the title and where it's going. And there's a lot of really cool mysteries that are starting to unfold, and they're starting to give us some good glimpses of what's going to happen here. This isn't just going to be a bunch of kids vigilantes. There's going to be a Bat focus here. They are going to be part of the Bat family.
Can we talk about Batgirl 42 in the annual? Would you mind if we go to that next? Because you mentioned Batgirl before, and I think it's a good segue to start talking about that.
Alrighty. Our next discussion will be on Batgirl number 42 with Cameron Stewart and Brendan Fletcher as the writers. Artist is Babs Starr with Jake Wyatt and Michael Lacombe on breakdowns. Sergei Lapuente is colorist with Steve Wan's letterer. Cameron Stewart cover. Dave Wielgos, Wielgos, as the assistant editor. Chris Conroy is editor, Mark Doyle group editor, and of course Batman was created by Bob Kane.
This book has been such an interesting journey for me. I'm loving Batgirl now, and it took me a while to get to, it hasn't been that many issues, but still, when they did the shift, Gail Simone for me set such a high bar on storytelling involving Barbara Gordon that goes all the way back to when she started Birds of Prey. Way back when. She set a really high mark for the quality of the character, what the character's all about, and really set a standard for me. The problem with that, and probably where I've been a little unfair, is I've really had tunnel vision when it comes to that because of the fact that I love her so much as an author that, I tend to gravitate towards her work, and it tends to be the case. This has been such a different take on Barbara, it's taken me a while to wrap my head around it. And it's funny, it's only been a few months, but a few months is quite a long time when it's this character, because Barbara Gordon's a character I've loved since my childhood. They're really doing a good job with this book because I'm into it now. This issue, I was like, when 42 was in, I was excited to read it, and especially with what's going on with her and her dad, and him being Batman now, and her knowing that he's Batman, and the tete-a-tete between the two of them. You know, he's got to arrest her. Here's the thing. If he knows, he's in denial. I don't, you know, we always go back and forth. Does he know? Does he not know? Does he know? Does he not know? With this whole confrontation between the two of them in this particular issue, I'm convinced that if he knows, he's not letting himself know.
Yeah.
if you know what I mean. You know, putting it back in his head. Or there have been things that have made him... You know how you get suspicious of something, then something happens. It's the old Superman analogy with Lois Lane, where, well, but this happened, and that made me realize that you weren't Superman, and that type of thing. It's actually very contemporary with what's going on right now in that title, which we'll talk about later. So we got this going on here, and I'm convinced that subconsciously he may know, because it's his daughter and all that, but he's also kind of watching himself. I do like that he's got a skirt, and this is the great thing about his appearances in every title. From this book to Detective Comics to Batman to the Batman Superman title, anytime Jim Gordon is Batman's on the scene, it's advancing his story and making this, like, I'm very into this. I'm into this the way that I was into when when they finally let Dick Grayson have a go at being Batman, and they did that great run with that. I got more and more into that with the character. Loved seeing him on Justice League. Love what they were doing more and more with the character all over the place. It was great. This, I hate this. This may be blasphemy. I think this might even be better because it's such a unique. Because it's not him inheriting a mantle and trying to be Bruce. He's inheriting a mantle and trying to handle this the way that Jim Gordon would, and it really is a very different take on the Batman concept. And I think knowing that Bruce was alive right away, very similar to what they did in the past, was a good move because I can really focus on enjoying this and seeing what it is. He's basically let us know that Powers wants the rest of the Bat family out of the picture. They really are because Powers is trying to use Batman as there's a publicity piece to this. They've got a direction that they want to go in. Anybody who's not a part of that direction, anybody's part of the old guard, need to be retired. Step aside, so that way the Powers movement, they're not telling them to kill them, they're to arrest them, take them out. They're vigilantes, let's get them off the table. We are approved. They are not. And that reveal in this was a very contemporary reveal, but also the father-daughter relationship here, very well written. Artwork's beautiful. I'm really into this title.
I can always tell when you're really into a title.
Because I won't shut up? Yeah.
I'm sitting there, you kept throwing out questions, and you kept going. Mm-hmm. I can always tell you, and it's funny because with me and Batgirl, you know, because everything when you were saying about with, you know, going into this, how we have this great love for the Gail Simone run, and there was a couple times when I was reading, you know, in 42 is when I kind of realized something. I felt like I was cheating. I'm like, no, but this isn't my Batgirl.
Yes,
over there, that's my Batgirl, and I kept, you know, having those type of moments, especially in this issue, because we got these great, just. You know, we got these Babs moments, and we got these moments where we got to see the coolness that was Batgirl before really come to life here. And the interactions with her and Gordon, I was so just like, man, on one hand, I'm like, he's got to know. Fiery redhead, you know, just determined, just everything, all the characters that make Barbara Gordon are in Batgirl. But then there's those moments where he doesn't. And it's, on one hand, I want to say he knows, but on the other hand, I don't think he does. Because when he was powered down, and when he was talking to her, and she even had that flashback to that moment where he's like, I just want to protect you. You know, he could have A, used that speech because of that moment, or B, that could have just been him talking. That's the way he talks. And that's just who he is, and that's his personality. And it's, you know, it is that guardian, it is that protector that is always Jim Gordon. So he's going to keep using this with her as well. You know, with that, not realizing they're one and the same. So I keep going flip-flopping back and forth saying, no, he doesn't know. but does he? And I like your fact that you say that he's convincing himself, no, it's not. Or he'll have a moment where he thinks, could that be Barbara? No, it can't be because of this. And he's forcibly convincing himself that it's not her. And I think that's kind of a, that's always going to be a really neat, area to see, because I want to see more of, Gordon, Batman, and Batgirl interacting, just to, again, for those moments where you're like, does he know? Does he not know?
Funny you mentioned, I feel like I'm cheating over this book. It took me, I do want to say this to people out there who dismiss this title, because I was in a place where I was like, I'm enjoying it. I'm still, she's skewed a little young. And I'm finally getting past that part, because that was a big problem for me. The fact that all of a sudden she seemed to magically de-age. And I do feel like as this book's progressed, they've done a much better job of showing how old she is and being very consistent with that growth. Like this, she went through this kind of the crisis of, that you go through in life, a midlife crisis, whatever you want to call it. And they kind of clarified her age, where she's at, what's going on with her, and I'm fine with that now. I do feel like she's still a little younger than I thought she was, but I've moved past it. The book itself has started to develop a really good superhero identity. And when you've got him involved and this going on, I love the fact that it does reference the larger DC universe. Especially things like, I loved that in the surge protection, right in the opening there, you see you're under arrest. I love the Black Canary poster in the background. Yeah. The artwork in this book has really grown on me. I really enjoyed in the combat sequences in this book. Like, that part has really been exciting. When we see her, like, getting into Batgirl, full-on Batgirl mode, I've really started to enjoy it. I hate to say, I'm really starting to dig the costume. I am. I'm into the costume now. I wasn't before because I liked the previous costume. This costume, I'm starting to dig.
I'm definitely digging this costume, and I like when she has more modifications that are becoming story related, where she's getting parts, she's getting tech improvements from her various, friends, those who know and those who don't know the secret. And I like the fact that she's got a couple people who are in on the secret. She's got her version of Oracle kind of helping her out, but she also has, Batgirl has her connections that she's getting some tech from with her friends that, who are going to be actually working for Luke Fox now, which, again, I love. They keep getting connected. Everything is, it's like it's a giant power play that Bruce is doing. And I want to think that Bruce Wayne is doing this master manipulation where he's getting all the pieces in place just to come back in force and take everything back. But again, that's part of just my own wishes in my head. I don't know. There's no evidence saying that, but just I'd love to think that we're seeing signs of, okay, here's this ground for this is being laid. We're going to get this master story of a return of Bruce Wayne. And again, it could be or couldn't be, but it definitely, she does have this feel and this connection to the Bat universe. And I'm glad that we didn't lose that, because for me, the Bat books have to have that connection. They've got to have that groove and that feel to it. Even though she's not technically with Bruce anymore, because he's not technically around, she still is part of the Bat family.
I will geek out when Bruce returns, but I'm so geeking out on the greater story going on. Like when he drops the armor and does it because it gives a 65-second reboot, so he's not being monitored. And really lays it out for her and just saying that, I believe that everything you guys have done has kept us going. I think bringing you in and exposing you would only put more families at risk. And her relating that to her childhood with him, basically him laying out the fact that as a police officer, it's in danger. I loved that. Him telling her, hey, we're almost out of time. The signal light will find us in the moment you need to disappear. Tells her to run. I absolutely loved every bit of that moment. It was just such a great emotional piece, and the drama on the characters' faces. That's what I'm saying with the artwork. The artwork is really growing on me in this book. This is a very pretty book. And especially when you see Batman drawn in this, the new Batman, that suit is very adaptable to different art styles, and both in and out of costume. And I really like the design. In the beginning, I used to make fun of it. It was the bunny suit. Now I'm in a different place on it. I really like the whole mech suit, especially after they revealed the inside suit. I'm like, okay, I'm in.
Yeah, that definitely did help. And I agree with you on the art style in this book. I really am. This is another one of those things where a couple issues for me to get the groove of this art style, and I absolutely love this. This looks great for Batgirl. It has this great feel and this great look for the character. It's one of those things where we always talk about when art and story mix and they mesh, and it's the story isn't just what's the story being told, but it's the visual looks behind it. I'm absolutely digging this art team. This is a great creative team working together here, and it's not an art style I would want on every single book, but it so fits this title perfectly that I'm like, you know what? We got to roll with this. Let's keep this going. This is cool.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying that aspect of this book, that it's grown over time. I will say this, I think it was the cliffhanger in 41 that probably made me prepared to go into 42 with this kind of attitude. This is the first issue of Batgirl where I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this title. And I wasn't saying it before this. I think I was I wasn't hating it. I was digging it, but there was always that tentative. I'm digging it, but. Actually, that's the best way to put it. I'm digging it, but. There's that thing, and it was her de-aging. It was that it wasn't the book I was reading before and all that kind of stuff. I think I was really stuck on that. This issue was the one where I'm like, okay, I've crossed the line. And maybe it is the whole status quo change in the Bat family in general. It's put me in a better place to be able to really enjoy the new status quo here. And that may be it. I'm so into, I think, all the changes that are going on, from, what's going on with Damian to Red Hood to what's going on in the Bat books, Grayson. All of it's working for me right now. We Are Robin. Because all that stuff, and the ancillary titles, like, the Gotham, was By Midnight? We got to talk about that book on the show. The
Gotham by Midnight.
Is Gotham by Midnight?
Yeah.
I keep forgetting the title of that one, but I'm really digging that one as well. The supernatural title set in the Bat universe, which is great. And Gotham Academy. There's a lot of really unique titles in that whole run I just mentioned there that are very different from each other. I think that's making me in a better place for this book.
Yeah, and it's funny because, with the art, when I was doing my art read through, one of the panels that just kind of like stuck out for me, because I agree with you, the Batman costume does look cool, but when Barbara is resuiting back up and she's got to go up to help save Batman, I love that, where she's talking to her partner and about, we got to figure out what, the Batman's, has got to arrest Livewire, but that robotic suit will be an easy target for her electric powers. And she's like, I need to know how to save Batman. And she's got that look of intensity. She's doing that little snap of their chin strap on the mask. And just right there, that was such a cool, moment where I was like, Barbara Gordon right there. There's the girl. You just see that look in her eye and you're like, okay, this is it was one of those moments that I was like, man, that's a cool looking panel.
The artwork in general, the whole dialogue between her and Frankie, when you see a lot of different facial expressions on Frankie, and that set mood and tone for me. That added a reality. Like, these characters started coming to life, and you and I talked on the show many times how we're both fans of facial expression to generate emotion, and I think it's something that's done really well here. I've come to really, it's funny, this art style was turning me off in the beginning because I think of the different direction for the character. Now I'm in exactly the opposite place with it. I adore this art style. It's like really great. There's a lot of expression here. And even Livewire, when you see Livewire, doing her little shtick that was going on there, when they were doing kind of the video, as you would nowadays. I love that they're going to the internet and they're searching for things that way. Barbara's relationship with Frankie so puts me in the frame that this is the girl that on a different path could have become Oracle.
Yes.
And I need that connection. I'm a big fan of Oracle. I loved the Oracle concept. And I recognize this is a different continuity. I'm fine with that. I have zero issue with it. But if we're going to say that this was a sidestep of the universe, and that all of that stuff did happen, all the stories of the past did happen, I want to believe this is a girl that in a different choice or in a different circumstance could have become Oracle. Being that this is contemporary, being that they're using, the internet this way, it fits the character, it fits her intelligence, it fits where she would go. And it makes the book a lot more unique. The other thing with her, too, she is the person that would have more friends. and would have this kind of dialogue going with Frankie. Her relationship with her confidants is going to be vastly different than anyone else in the Bat family, and it really should be. And I like that. I like the lighter side of Barbara right now, especially if they're going with her being a little younger. She didn't go the path that Oracle did. And Oracle, because of the path that she went, and she went with the Suicide Squad, and that led her to be a part of the Birds of Prey, or to start the Birds of Prey, I should say, and to become that person along the way, she became a squad leader. And that path is going to lead you to be a lot more regimented, a lot more... And she was more mature. She had experienced a lot more. I'm cool with that. This distinction works for me, and I do still feel this is a girl that, if the path allowed for it, could become Oracle. And that's all I need. I need that. I need to feel that this is still my character. And she certainly is. That determination you're talking about with the snap, I totally agree. Like, that, to me, I need to know how to say Batman. Ugh! Go get him.
Yeah, there are some cool moments. And, here's one that you're talking about, art team and just attention to detail, that I didn't catch this until, second, third read through on the art side. When she's going into battle, getting ready to go into battle with Livewire, when she's overlooking the power plant, the Burnside light and power, you see the moment where she's taking off her cape. Mm-hmm. In the shadows. Then in her fight sequence, she's got the backpack on instead of the cape. I'll be honest, I didn't notice that until a couple read-throughs. And when I finally noticed that, I'm like, wait, where's her cape? And then I started going back through. I'm like, oh, right there, they show her taking it off. And that is cool.
The snaps from earlier were her snapping on her cape. The cape has 2 snaps on the shoulders, each side. That's what the snaps are.
Oh, I thought that was her...
No.
Okay, I thought that was the mask. Okay, no, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, if you take a look at the cape when it's on, there's actually 2 gold snaps on each side.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm with you. I love the backpack piece because, again, it's another distinction of how she's different. Barbara at her best, I've always loved when they've had issues where there were Nightwing and Barbara Gordon before this switch, where there were those issues where the two of them were together, and Nightwing referenced her as the ballet dance. There was more of a dancer's move to her. It's important that you distinguish her. I always loved that because when you distinguish her that way, you start to separate her from Batwoman, too, and the Bat family, any of the males in the group. And I like that. I love that Dick Grayson, you separate him as the acrobat. And Jason Todd, he's more brutal, because of the fact that his path led to that. There's a distinction between all of them that sets them apart and makes them unique personalities. The Batgirl and Batwoman was a really important distinction for me because you didn't want to get into this, well, it's just another Bat female and they're all the same. And because that's not real life. Real life is they're really valid, living, thriving characters, they're each valid, and when you bring them to the table, they're interesting. And Barbara is such a well-defined character that I love seeing this character with Batwoman when we see her. Because there is a distinction between the two. And there's something about that makes this character fun to follow because you actually care about her because you know her so well. Yeah. And I geeked out at the backpack thing. I thought the visuals of that's what I meant about combat earlier. When that started kicking off, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really just a great fight sequence.
Oh, God, yeah. And it's, again, you have to have that type of, as you said, that ballet, that flow, that dancing style, that stick and move type of activity that Batgirl does. But it's also that, but there's also the level of strategery that she's got going with where she's got the plans how to take out Livewire. She's got the rubber insulated, full sleeve gloves that's going to protect her from the electrical shocks, including even goggles she's putting on her eyes to cover from to protect her from the bright flashes that's going to come with the electricity. There's just a lot of little stuff that Barbara's going to bring to the mix to make sure that this is she can take down Livewire. And again, it's not just trained by the Bat. These are qualities that Barbara Gordon has as well.
Now, I just want you to know that strategery is in the Unword Dictionary online, and I'm doing this on behalf of Barbara Gordon. It actually came from that George Bush sketch on Saturday Night Live. That's where it came from. Yeah, so I just want you to know it is, in fact, in the Unword dictionary. There's an Unword dictionary, unword.com, unwords.com, I should say, and strategery is one of those that wind up in the Unwords dictionary. And that's a shout-out to my friend Barbara Gordon, who would have also similarly looked it up in a similar fashion.
I never wonder if you're going to acknowledge my using it.
Well, I wanted to acknowledge it, but I wanted to do it in a way that was very fitting to the book that we're reading in question. I love the bit when Batman again comes out of the suit and the two of them are fighting Livewire, and you get to see Batman and Batgirl team up, father-daughter team up. The visuals of this issue, and I do want to say again, and I don't know if you agree with me, Jim, if this is, to me, if you kind of drop Batgirl and you're like, I'm not enjoying the new direction, skip the rest, jump to 42. And I really do think this is an issue where, especially if you're enjoying the current Batman direction, you really want to see this issue because I think it shows you where this book has evolved to. And there's been an evolution in this book. And this really is, I couldn't have hoped for it to achieve this. I'm in a place with this book right now where I'm really loving Batgirl again the way I have. And that's been hard for me because Batgirl, when Gail Simone was writing it, was my go-to title. I really loved her run on Batgirl. And I'm back to that place again. It's different. This is not Gail Simone's run. And I like that it's not trying to be because I don't want it to be Gail Simone light. I think when you try to do that, she never does that. It's one of the things I like about her as an author. She has a very unique voice. And when she comes onto a project, she embraces all of the layers of the project and delivers her own take on it. I think, your better writers are doing that. So this isn't trying to be that. And you're right. It felt like I kind of feel like I'm cheating on Gail Simone by sitting here because I love her. But I'm really loving this book now, and I'm glad I'm in that place because this is a character that's been important to me since my childhood, since the show. The original one with Yvonne Craig playing the character. And I love the fact that I'm back enjoying Batgirl to this level again. Kudos to the creative team for hitting this point. I think it's for them been a feeling out process. I hope this consistently is what we see from here on out. And I think when we start talking about the annual, I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I agree with you on just, a lot of that sentiment that you're going through. And this is definitely a book that if you drop Batgirl, I would also concur. Pick up 42, read 42. You get a really cool idea of who Batgirl is now. And if you read this and you dig this, go pick up maybe some of the past stuff so you can see some of the flow through that gets to it. But 42, you can jump right on to a great comic. And it's a continuation of, just some excellence.
One other thing we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about is the closing sequence. We win, high five, and she's like, "You're really getting into character, huh?" And he's kind of, carrying himself at that point. I hope you'll come to realize I'm not your enemy. I want you to trust me. Tonight we made a pretty good team. And she goes, "This is the part where you're supposed to vanish on me." Still got a few of his tricks left to learn. I absolutely loved that whole sequence. What's great about this book is it does what I like about Batgirl. Because she is the softer touch in there, you can deliver hard-hitting battles with her because she's trained. She's been doing this. She is an expert. She is a veteran in the DC mythos. But she's that one at the end that can have this kind of conversation in there, and it doesn't come off as hokey. It comes off as charming. There's a difference, and there's a huge distinction. That was charming, and I really enjoyed how that played out. Then I wanted to see, I'm starting to enjoy seeing her back in her real world. Her former roommate shows up, and we start seeing so much of the history there coming into play. I'm glad that there was no disconnect with that, because that character arc and everything that was going on with her and her roommate in the past was important to me too. Yes. So I say kudos again to the creative team for recognizing, hey, this is an audience base. We need to service them as well. And they're doing that. That's where this book is really working for me. It's the connections that they make to the past as well. And it's got a lot of balance to it. Let's see. You want to talk about the annual?
Oh my God. I love this annual. I absolutely loved this annual just because going through following the story with her and the multiple people she interacted with. I love the fact that they shifted the art style depending on which team she was partnered up with to match, what the regular book does. This for me was a absolute just joy to read.
Yeah, and to me it was great to see Grayson. Actually, let me go through the art team real quick on this one because it's the same writers, but Bengal and David LaFuente did pages 19 to 23. Ming Doyle, pages 24 to 29. It's Mingjue, Helen Chen on pages 30 to 36 are the artists. Bengal, Gabe Altieb, Ivan Placencia, and it's Mingjue, Helen Chen on colors. Steve Wan's on letters, Bengal on cover. Dave Wielgos is the associate editor. Chris Conroy is the editor. Mark Doyle is the group editor. And Batman, of course, created by Bob Kane. Right from I've Got You in the beginning, I think because this has just been such a great month for Batgirl, I'm like, yeah, man, let's go. Come on, more Bat stuff. And this is really awesome. I'm on board. You're right. We had different art teams on this annual, and I like that the tone and the presentation and the consistency felt very rich to the regular title. And you could tell that it was different art teams, but it still held the theme. And I like that. I'm a fan of that because I want to feel like this is a part of that book. But it also held the theme for me of Grayson, which is a book that I think artistically is setting a very high standard at DC right now. Grayson is a very pretty book, and in how it handles all of the locations, action, drama, unfolding. So it's really important that this annual connected with that title as well as Batgirl. And this is a great marriage of this because I wanted to see Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon in the same book. The fact that they teased them being around the corner from each other on the cover was not a throwaway because that's very much what this book was all about. It was him avoiding her. And I liked the acknowledgments of, I think this book helped convince me that maybe Gordon doesn't know.
Yeah, she doesn't know.
No, I'm talking about maybe Jim Gordon doesn't know about her because of the fact that she talked herself out of it being Dick Grayson.
Yeah, that was absolutely a cool moment because when she saw, she saw his butt and she was like, wait a minute, I know that. It's like, no, he's dead. He's dead. Get past it. And I love the fact that she had that flicker of moment, and then she's able to convince herself that it's not. That's got to be the same type of mindset that Gordon has. He's like, he sees the fiery red hair, sees just the look. I'm like, is that Barbara? No, it can't be. She wouldn't do something like this. Or no, she's at college. No, she's doing this. There's all the different stuff that he's able to convince himself and help him move through it and not go back to it.
Here's the thing, and if anybody was upset about the fact, well, she looked at the butt and saw him. Here's the part that made that all work for me, and I could care less what she saw that made her think. It's when Dick Grayson says this, Helen, I'm serious, okay? She can't see me. She thinks I'm dead. You gotta keep her back. Why don't you use your hypnos implant? She'll see any face you want her to see. She's smart. She's observant. She could peg me by my body language alone. I'm going up. Let's hope I can stay ahead of you. That line right there, yeah. I don't care how she caught on any level after that. Dick Grayson saying, this is why we got a problem, validated any way she noticed. It didn't matter what she saw. She was going to, on some level, make the connection, and he knew it. And I loved how it played out in this issue. I loved his presentation there. I really love that the writers clearly did research on the Grayson book because this felt like an issue of Grayson as much as it felt like an issue of Batgirl. And that's hard to do. And it's really important for me because of the fact that I'm loving Grayson. Grayson's on my short list. It really is on my short list of one of my favorite books to read right now at DC. I've got a lot of them right now, which is a great place to be in. It's funny, one of our friends, Rob Trelizzi, he sent me a message, and I haven't had a chance. I just saw it today. Sometimes I get those Facebook messages from people, those direct messages, and I don't always see them, just because I don't always, I usually just go to people's posts on their pages, and I don't always check the messenger. But he sent me one, how annoyed are you right now at DC? And I've got an honest answer to that one. Aside from the fact there's a few titles that I really loved that are gone now, I'm digging the new direction on pretty much everything. I mean, I'm really having a good time with this. And it is stuff like this where writers sit there and go, hey, you know what? What they're doing over at Grayson's awesome. Let's make sure that we acknowledge it here and do it proud. They did it proud here. This felt like an issue of Grayson, too.
Oh, big time. And it still had its the Batgirl touches. I loved, like, when we, because I completely agree with you where, he goes into the fact that she can recognize just by body language alone. And when they're going into the tower, they're seeing people unconscious. And, why are these people unconscious? She's like, I don't know. I was like, okay, maybe I brought backup. And just that look on her face, like, really? You're going to try to pull this on me now? It was a little chuckle kind of moment between those two panels, but it never took away from the fact that we were getting a really cool issue here. We were getting some neat, Grayson, some neat, Batgirl stories being told. And I got to tell you, again, the physical artwork have been some awesome fight sequences, but then you get a little bit of a kind of look on some of their faces when, you got a room full, you got a floor full of bad guys just unloading with machine guns. You see them duck for cover, but you never lost the action. You never lost the intensity. There was some really great blend of comedic moments, but also still that great action sequences.
Dude, to your point, that page where, okay, maybe I brought backup. Sure, that was comedic there. But then you go to the next page where these guys come in with machine guns. She flips Helena's hand out of the way, no killing. She goes, brother. And Batgirl's doing that great knee to the sternum. I mean, sorry, chuckles are done. And then you see the two of them fighting. That's really important if you're going to add humor in its balance. Humor with balance. I love humor. Best action movies have great humor in them, and they have one-liners. And that is a lot of times how you deal with intense situations, and I get it. The problem is you do too much, it becomes slapstick, and you do too little, the characters become wooden. They read like humans. They read very real in this sequence, and you want to be this confident in those situations. They're confident because of their history. The fact that Helena and Dick Grayson and Barbara Gordon are all veterans. They've been doing this. That showcases through the writing, that showcases through the art, that showcases through the action that we see play out on the screen here. And this does feel very much like an unfolding film. And that's the part that I'm really digging. I've been watching a lot of old action movies lately. I've actually been watching episodes, too, of $6 Million Man and stuff like that. But I've been watching some old Arnold Schwarzenegger action movies just because I've been in them. I actually watched the movie, too, Uncommon Valor recently. And it's funny. I don't know. I just got in summer mode of, like, let's watch some old action. And I think Expendables, the series of films, kind of got me nostalgic for some of the ones that I grew up with. I watched Commando and Predator and Kindergarten Cop and all kinds of stuff like that, too. What I liked about those is they don't try to be anything other than what they are. And I think that's important. This book is trying to be what it is. It's trying to be a really good Batgirl book. You know what I mean? And it's embracing all elements of that. The intelligence of Barbara, but also the accessibility of Barbara. Dick Grayson's the same thing. Why is Grayson such a great book? The intelligence of Dick Grayson, but the accessibility of Dick Grayson. And when you see them with a Helena who's not as accessible, with a Jim Gordon who's not as accessible, because of the fact that they can't be in their roles, they stand out even more because of that. And that's just great writing when you know your characters so well that you know how they're going to react to different people in different situations and different intensities. That's what made these two issues. I mean, this is a great month for these characters.
Yes. Yeah, and it's the I loved some of these moments with them because we talked about it just briefly where they're on either side of the wall and you get that kind of intensity and Helena pulls her out of it. Yes. And Helena's covering for Grayson. And they're going to go up the elevator shaft knowing that Grayson's going to go the other route. And it's a great thing, but that even leads to, again, some more really cool fight sequences. This was one of those kind of Jackie Chan movies for me where they're constantly scrambling. They're constantly doing some crazy fight sequences, some crazy stunts. They're fighting inside the elevator shaft, hanging from the cables as they're, doing some pretty nasty, cool stuff. It's this, you talk about action sequences, and I was nodding my head with you when you were talking about all the great action movies and all that, but this again has, for me, a Jackie Chan feel.
Yes.
Where it was just scrambling, bump, bump. I can kind of hear the dun, 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 dun kind of music going as, again, Helena and Batgirl just have this great, flow and style to them. I was like, makes me wish this was the new Birds of Prey right here.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. You could really build off of this one to be that. You know what? Here's the thing. The characters aren't ready to be that.
No.
And I wouldn't mind seeing another Birds of Prey title down the road when the characters are ready to be those characters again. And I want to see that journey get to that point. I want that too, but these characters aren't quite there yet. The other sequence, I want to reference that sequence where she almost encounters Dick Grayson, where, he's running, and you can actually see him in the background, noticing she's there. He dashes around the corner. That next page, where she flips over the stairs. First of all, I love the grace in that. That's where the artwork's really getting to me in the Batgirl title in general. She recognizes that the backup's around the corner. Their hands are almost touching. The sweat on his brow, but also her tentative nature. I don't know who this is. Is this person friendly or not? Because I'm taking it on face value that this Helena, who I'm working with, is on the up and up. But does she really know that? Yeah. And the answer is no, she doesn't. I loved how this was written. I loved how it visually played out. It was a great, intense sequence there. And it's all building drama. And that's where it's really working for me, too. And I was like, whoa, what a great sequence of events there.
Oh, big time, big time. And I did chuckle where Grayson needed to call for backup. Mm-hmm. And I was like, call for backup, yeah. But even this led to additional story parts because now Batgirl was ahead of him. He had to stay ahead of her, and he couldn't because of this. And it was a really cool, moment with, again, I'm always pro backup, but it added to the story. And right along with this, you're getting some really great Batgirl sequences. At the beginning of this story, they mentioned this is going to be a fully armored, heavily guarded facility. This is their main bunker. And they weren't kidding with the number of guards. They've been fighting every single floor, and every single deck had even more guards, bigger guys, massive, fighting going on. This was a really cool sequence.
Christian Kroger, that sequence when he showed up there, because he knew, she's going to have to see me. There's nothing I can do about it. She's going to have to see me. He didn't move. He didn't move at all. He stood there with his arms crossed. He went out of his way to avoid moving so she couldn't read his body language.
Yeah.
That was very cool. There was no choice at the end when the explosion went off, but with everything that was going on there, she couldn't focus on him. And that's where it worked out. And that led to that end sequence where she caught one movement of him, and she was already questioning things. She was when she first saw him, because she did a double take to Kroger in the beginning, which I loved. But it was really that. And seeing her there, not being able to tell her, why do we do this? And that internal dialogue was so Dick Grayson, so matches what goes on with the character in the Grayson title. I love that this felt like a Grayson 0.5 issue as much as it felt like a Batgirl 0.5 issue.
Yes. Oh, big time. And the scene that I didn't catch, again, until my second and third art read-throughs, that her actually slipping the transmitter on the bad guy as she's getting away.
Yes.
Because I was so captivated with everything going on, especially then when Kroger's there. It just with her seeing the hostages there and the device and everything there. It was a one little kind of a half a panel where they show her slipping the tracker in there. I was like, oh, that is awesome. Because later in the next story, you see her following the tracker, that she planted. And I remember when I first read it through, I just assumed during that fight sequence. It wasn't until I went back through and read it, I actually saw her planting it. I was like, man, that's some cool stuff. Again, the stories just boom, 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 one after another, fed into each other. And it was, multiple parts of the same story arc, all told within that single annual. This was an absolute wonderful annual.
A panel I want to reference, too, is that part where this day is just beginning, where, she's got that kind of... What I love about that is there's a sense of adventure to this book and to this character. And that's important to me, too. I love adventure in comics. I want to feel like, there comes a point where you can't have all of your heroes downtrodden all the time, because then it's kind of like, we all want to pretend that you want to do this. You know what I mean? And don't get me wrong, I like the reality that this is difficult on the characters, and you see that in this issue as well, especially with Dick Grayson's commentary, how what he's doing as an agent is putting him in a situation where, wow, this is really emotionally difficult, and I like that. But I love that Batgirl reminds us that, but there's a fun factor to this, too. Yeah. There's an adventure. There's an adrenaline rush and excitement to all this. And that's great. It's very Spidey. I love Spider-Man for that at its best. I think Spider-Man at its best is that. And I would say that both with Peter Parker stories and Miles Morales. Those are the things that I really dig. Invincible, at its best, has elements of that as well. These are things I'm digging in those type of titles. So I'm glad to see it here in Batgirl. While not taking away next page... You've got her with tech equipment on, which I'm geeking out over because she's got every little gadget imaginable, and that leads to the confrontation with Spoiler, who was great to see appearing in. And there's an art shift here in this sequence. It's a very apparent art shift, yet there's not a tone shift. That was the thing that worked for me. The art switch stood out for me easily in that sequence, but the tone did not change.
Yeah, definitely. And again, it was one of those where this fit how the story they were telling. This had a little bit more of a comical feel to it. This had some really cool, fun banter with Spoiler going, "Yeah, I did it. I took down a bat. Oop, boom, boom, boom." Next thing you know, you knocked her down. You didn't take her out. There's a big difference, when you're dealing with somebody like Barbara. And I love just even her trying, Spoiler trying to basically keep up, and that where she's throwing up a barrage of punches and Barbara's blocking and avoiding, and it's not even breaking stride for her. And I thought that was just, again, a cool motion of Spoiler is very new at this. She's just getting the groove. This is the beginning of Spoiler, not the experience. Spoiler, Barbara has so much, experience on the fighting, training, and whatnot that she's going to be able to take her without any hesitation. I loved just this page. It was some fun stuff. There was some action, but there was also true to the story, true to the character, true to the stuff that came before this. It's a continuation of that same story.
I love the Batwoman pages because everything you're saying is so true about the Spoiler sequence, but then it gets a lot more serious when it's Batwoman. And I like that Barbara switches based on situation. And we see different facets of Barbara based on those situations. That's really important. And that was something, this annual, I was totally geeking out over. And I read issue 42 before reading the annual. So, I got into that groove, and then I ended up reading the annual, and I'm like, wow, this is just a lot of fun. Just enjoying this whole really, really cool Batgirl ride. And the art shift was much more Batwoman in this one. Like, it felt like it was something out of the pages of Batwoman.
Right.
And I liked that Barbara felt very natural in that, and we got to see the fight where, again, you got Barbara and Batwoman teaming up together, saving the Colonel. It was another just great sequence of events that I thought forwarded both characters.
And I love the fact that within just a couple panels, Barbara's starting to put together who Batwoman is.
Mm-hmm.
Nara was military, retired West Point instructor. Were you? Let's keep moving. She started putting together who Batgirl, who Batwoman is, and just in a couple panels, and she's getting the flow again. And that's Barbara. She is that detective. She does have that intelligence, but these were just some really cool moments of these two characters. We see the dramatic difference in them, but we also do see they are both heroes. They are both fighting for people who need, that assistance. And I love the fact that knowing the personal stuff about Batwoman, that this was her friend. This was somebody that, she regularly would meet with and have a couple drinks with and everything. So I dig that. That was something I was like, man, that's kind of cool.
The good part about this issue, and where I think it really just capped off at the end, having that last bit at Gotham Academy, and the art shift, again, being much more Gotham Academy, but then Barbara being Barbara at Gotham Academy. What this issue succeeded in doing, this annual, is it showed us how you thought that Batgirl with her new status quo was disconnected from what's going on in the Batman universe. It couldn't be less true. We're going to show you exactly how she fits into that universe and what this universe means to her. And I thought that Gotham Academy was like the right cornerstone at the end where I'm like, wow, yeah, she works in this book too. I mean, this is so great because I'm loving all these titles. But on a flip side end, it also showed how all of these titles fit together. And all of these characters fit together. I know we don't have a Batwoman title right now, but these are titles that, whether they've been canceled or they're titles that are currently ongoing, I like knowing how they all go together. Spoiler doesn't even have her own book, but these are characters and concepts. I want to see how they all fit together and that they are part of the same universe. I never expected that connectivity to come through a Batgirl annual, and they did a bang-up job of this.
Oh, big time. And Maps was awesome.
Yes.
Again, and Barbara just, kind of feeding, she fed the fire there with Maps a little bit. And this is, again, I love the ending of this issue just because it did end so positively with Maps going, superhero club. I need to design a costume. First a cool jacket. Oh, a mask. Oh, yellow boots. I'm like, okay.
But that stuff...
I want to see in, Gotham Academy, her in her superhero club costume.
Yeah, and that stuff is so great because there's a reality to that. That's part of when you have this intense experience. It changes you afterwards and it gets you excited, or has the opposite effect. But I loved knowing the nature of Maps. Barbara would be a strong female she'd look up to, and yet a welcoming and confident female that she would look up to. And it's great to see that done with a female character. A lot of times it's Batman that inspires, boys or even girls. You know what I mean? This was nice because it was Batgirl inspiring another girl. And I love seeing that happen with Maps. Because I love Maps as a character. Yeah. And that so totally fits the character. It was so well written there. But I liked seeing that because Barbara Gordon is a very inspirational character. So that so worked out for me there. And it was great to see that out of this comic. It was just another layer where I'm like, yes, they're getting it. They needed to build a stride. I don't know if it was me that it was the problem that I wasn't getting, where they were going with it. Or if it was just that the book finally hit this stride. Whatever the case is, I don't care. I'm glad it's here right now because this annual was a total home run for me.
Oh, God, yeah. This is one of my favorite annuals I've read so far. This was an absolute fabulous story where each piece continued on and it completely fit into this universe.
Yes.
It fit into all the universes.
Absolutely 110% true. It totally fit into all the universes with it. Jim, do you want to jump from this to Superman? Just because I think in Superman we've had some major happenings, and that's that truth justice storyline that's going on through all the books. But I think this is some major reveals. So let's talk some Superman.
Let's continue on with Superman number 42. The writer is Gene Yang with John Romita Jr. on pencils, Klaus Janson on inker, Dean White, Will Quintana, Tomei Mori on colorist, Rob Lay letterer, Romita Jr., Jackson White on the cover, with Jorge Corona for the Teen Titans variants cover. Andrew Marino, assistant editor. Eddie Berganza is the group editor. And, of course, Superman was created by Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster by special arrangement with the Jerry Siegel family.
I love Superman. I'm going to say it again. I love Superman. I am so excited to read anything Superman related right now in the DC universe. This has really been a great storyline, what they're doing. I like that this is gradually unfolding, the past of this. Like, how did we get to this point? We saw the event. But I like that. I also like that in other issues, we're reading the after effects of it. And this title in and of itself the art is spectacular. Romita Jr. on art, I don't know where you're at on the artwork on this one. I've mentioned on previous episodes that, I'm used to him being a Marvel guy and loved him on so many Marvel titles that when he came over to DC, it was very much a Marvel style coming over here. And I mentioned this previously in the cast, and I'm totally going to hit it here on this issue. I don't see it that way anymore. I see this as being the style of the Superman book because he's changed his style and adapted his style to match the story that's being told here. And where it hits a home run for me, you've got these great sequences where they're just talking in the beginning, but then all of a sudden they're attacked by this ninja squad, and Superman is having this beautiful, beautiful action sequence fighting them. And I'm so no, this is very much a Romita Jr. Superman art style. This is what he's doing with this book and how he's telling it. And I've hit the hump now where I'm I really want to see more Romita Jr. on Superman and more of what he's going to do. The storytelling is great. The writer, I don't want to say I was worried. I wasn't, because his interviews before he actually took over had me very enthusiastic about the writer. But you're following Jeff Johns. That's very hard to do, and there was that piece to this puzzle. But man, out of the gate, to follow Jeff Johns and to be delivering this kind of storytelling says a lot. This is really a marquee book right now.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. And I agree with everything you're saying there. I'm just I was silently nodding my head, especially with this art style. You know, this is an absolutely beautiful book. And I'm really digging what they're bringing to it, and just visual treat of that fight sequence where he's just throwing down. And we've had a bunch of previous issues where we're showing the after effect of what we're getting right now, where the depowered Clark is fighting through the pain. And here we're seeing a still fully powered Clark fighting and doing his thing. I was like, man, this is some cool stuff. And this is just a great story of how Lois got the truth, how Lois figured everything out, how Lois is able to put the pieces together. And I'm really glad we got it told the way it was told, where we had the present and now we're kind of doing flashback to show us how and why it happened. If this had gone through a regular traditional timeline story, I think it would have lost some of the dramatic effects. Like, especially that scene where after fighting off the ninjas and Lois goes up and confronts it, I need to know for sure, and rips off the tattered shirt, and you see you see the suit underneath, and Clark takes off his glasses and he's just standing there. He's like, Lois, let me explain. That one panel, I absolutely loved that panel, just because I was like, yes. It was just that moment of revelation, just even her going, oh God, just that look of surprise on her face. Even though she knew going into it, she was still, the final 100% truth still shocked her. And that was awesome.
Yeah. You think you know something. When you know, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because it's, but you don't want to know at the same time. And I really liked how that played out in this particular issue. The fact that Lois didn't really want to know what she was saying she knew. And this has really been a great title for that. And Clark having to explain, but then her saying, and it's a true fact, you've been lying to me all along. So if you lied about this, what else did you lie about? Where can I trust you? It becomes a huge conundrum. Like, one of the things you can always justify as Superman fans is why he had to lie. And we agree with it. And we will defend his reasons for doing it. But it's still a lie. And it is going to hurt people. Now, was it the right thing for Superman to do all along? Yeah, it was. But it's still a lie. And there's going to be trust that is broken down. Can you heal from that? Yes. But in this universe in particular, he and Lois are friends and coworkers and colleagues and things like that. But they aren't to the level of what we've seen in the past, because they haven't quite developed to that yet.
Yeah, they're still in the friend zone.
Yeah.
And when you're friends, and I can understand her being hurt, I can understand just everything going on there. And I thought that was kind of neat, where when he explains, he starts to try to explain, I've got a secret identity. The only way I can be normal, or at least normal-ish. He's like, you're normal? Why would you want to be normal? And he's trying to explain it. It's one of those things where if they could have had time to just sit down and have a conversation and explain it, they could have worked through it. And there would have been completely dramatically different, but they don't have time to stop. They don't have time to rest. They got to keep moving. They got to get on the Toyman. They got to figure everything out with the headquarters and everything that just kind of prevented them from having that conversation. And I thought that was just a nice way to give us the initial, and then, you got to keep pushing the story. And part of it, I'm thinking, is Blue pushing the story because she wants to make sure they don't have those moments where they can sit down and relax. They don't have those moments where they can sit down and put all the pieces together.
I think, though, the hard part about that is it's such a deep cut that one conversation isn't going to do it. And you're right, sitting down together would begin to heal those wounds, but that would be a beginning. And really it would be a prologue to it, because you basically have to find a way, how do we start over from here? And until you get to that point, you're not going to get anywhere, because this is big. It's not a small infraction. This is, you've lied to me about everything. I don't even know who you really are. You know, and how much of Clark Kent is real, how much of Superman is real, and who is this third person now that's in front of me? Because there's three parts to Superman's identity. There is the Superman mask, there's the Clark Kent mask, and then there's the real person. That becomes
who is Kal-El?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's the part, or who is Clark? You know, any way you cut it, there's two Clarks. You know, it's my two Clarks. Da, 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 da. Yeah. But that's the part of the story I've always liked. I remember I was at a panel once. I don't know if you were there. Were you at the convention I was at that Dean Cain was there?
No, I don't think. No, that was Columbus.
Yeah. Dean Cain was at a Columbus Wizard convention. One of the things I always loved about the TV show Lois and Clark was the fact that he played really three roles. He played Clark Kent at the Daily Planet, he played Superman, and he played the Clark that we saw when he was with his parents, at least initially. You know, then that transferred over to Lois as times went on, but that was when he was totally honest, you know, and let all the masks down, and you got to see that. And I mentioned if that was something purposeful. And, you know, that he said that was something he was consciously trying to do because he was well aware of, you know, the triple nature of really that relationship that Superman has with the world. And I really liked that. And I think it's one of the reasons why you and I are both such big fans of that show was the portrayal of Superman's life, the way that Superman lives and interacts with the world, I thought was very strong in that program. So I think we're seeing elements of that here that I really like in the nature of the character and seeing him go through this. Plus, here's the problem. They're in an intense situation where they need trust to get through it. They're being betrayed along the way. I mean, that adds to the drama of the whole thing. Because we've got the Horde, or Hoarder, who is, basically bringing everyone together here, recognizing that there are people infiltrating because Blue is already turned on him because of the fact that she's being held hostage, so to speak, with what's going on.
Yeah, I want to know what he's got on her.
I do too.
Because that, again, it was a neat moment where, where Jimmy confronts her and she's like, hey, he's got stuff on me too. He's got stuff on everybody. And that's a tough one. Again, that's a tough call to make. If you were in that situation, would you or wouldn't you? Depending on what is at stake here. What is that it factor that he's got on you? If it's something as huge as every single person you've known and loved are going to die in a heartbeat, guess what? I may work with him as well. You're forced to do it, but you may go through with it. There's so many different levels to this story that still hasn't been revealed. And I love the fact that as we're getting more pieces of the puzzle, it's opening up another mystery. It's opening up another question. Who is she? How is she going to play into this? Who is Hoarder? Who is Hoarder really? Because we saw part of that thing where when Lois takes the pipe to his head, he's like, this is just a shell. I'm done with this body now, and disappears. Part of me wonders if Blue is actually Hoarder. Especially giving her weird computer type, tech powers that she has. Could she actually be Hoarder?
I don't know. Condessa, I think she's actually legit. I think that Hoarder really does, have something over her, which is why she has this conundrum. She's trying to help them, and I think her trying to help them is genuine. But I think also she's got this problem of Hoarder figures her out, and when Hoarder figures her out, she's got to give everything up, because if she doesn't, whoever it is, you're caught into this trap. You and I both have a lot of people we're close to, and I would even go on our own friendship. But if somebody held you hostage or something like that, that would compromise me. You're my friend, but we both are very close with our families too. And if it was a family member of mine, it's kind of like, what do you do at that point? You want to think that you would try to find a clever way to save everybody, right? And stick to your moral guns. But sometimes you don't have that option until you've got a leg up on the competition, so to speak. And right now, she tries to at certain times, and I believe that's genuine. She tries to at certain times get a leg up on Hoarder and do something to, thwart some of his plans because it goes against her moral code. But then she has no choice because her family's involved. There's a reality to that I find fascinating with Blue. And here's the thing. Could she be Hoarder? Could Hoarder have jumped into her as well? Sure. There's a reality to that, and sure, that might be the case. I don't think so, though. I really think it's legitimately that she's being blackmailed.
Yeah, I'd like to believe that as well, because I think she'd be a cool character and a cool connection with Jimmy and just inside the Superman universe. But just so we know, for the record, if I'm ever being held captive and used as, being used as blackmail, avenge my death. Just let me die, but avenge my death.
Well, I got that on recording now, so sure. All right.
That's why I said it.
I just want you to know I'm really sad about this, but hey, listen to this. I'm going to try to get
I know you feel the same way, Sean.
I'm going to try. No, I don't. No. You save me. Save me. Be heroic, Jim. I want you to be heroic and save me, Jim. And I want to be able to thank you because I know how tough it will be on you to be able to maintain your morals while at the same time making sure I get rescued. And I just want you to know that I think you have the intestinal fortitude to save me and save others. My self-preservation's pretty high, fella. I love this story though because of exactly what we're joking around about it, but it's a moral conundrum because the situation that he poses, you could be put in situations where you're compromising people close to you, and it would force you to evaluate levels of closeness with relationship. You know what I mean? Where you've got to almost say, well, but this relationship is the bigger priority. That's hard. I like stories like this because of the deep nature of it, where you can see people compromising each other. Superman has to make choices like this. We saw Superman make choices like this when he was outed. Where Hoarder was like, hey, I know you. And Superman had to make these choices. But then Superman turned on it. Being uniquely Superman, he's like, well, I'm not going to let this stand. I'm going to do something because he's Superman. And that's where you see the strength of character of somebody. I'd like to think I would handle things the way Superman did. Where I'm like, okay, I'll play along as much as I can, but you better believe if I think I can thwart you or save somebody, I'm not going to cause somebody's death if I can rescue them. And those are things where Superman played that game really well. I'd like to think I would do that.
And all kidding aside, I think that's where it's weird because that's the part of the Superman where he always feels he can do that. There's always another way to do it, and that's always been the difference with the similarities with him and Batman, where they both have the no-kill code. They always believe there's another way to go about this. There's always something else he can do, and he will always push for that. And I think that again, this is showing that this is a classic Superman moment where he's like, I'm going to flare out, I'm going to level the entire building, and hopefully that'll get rid of the information. Hopefully that will free me and all these other people. Because it's not just about freeing himself at this moment. He's actually trying to free all the other people who are under Hoarder's influence. Now, does it work? Does it backfire? Would it actually be the case? I can't imagine Hoarder doesn't backup file everything that he has on people. So physically destroying this one facility, is that going to actually take out Hoarder? I don't think so. But you gotta be impressed with what he's trying to do and how he does it. And it's again this really cool sequence where he's doing the flare up, and here's where we see what went wrong with the flare-up this time. Because I love the fact that we kept speculating maybe it's something with the nature of the flare-up. No, there's an outside party.
Hoarder did this too. Well, if it's not Hoarder, I wonder if it isn't that. Why am I drawing a blank? From the Romita Jr. Jeff Johns Superman story. You know what I'm talking about?
Ulysses.
Ulysses. I wonder if it wasn't Ulysses.
It could be. But again, he's like, who are you? Mm-hmm. So Clark doesn't know who this is. So there's a new party in the mix. Now maybe that new party is actually Hoarder, or maybe it's something else or someone else, or there's a whole nother mystery to the story.
But with the flare up, could Superman even see him? Here's what we don't know. Does Superman, is the visual we're seeing the same visual that Superman's seeing? Do you see
energy? Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying? And then when he goes away, we can't see what that is. I'm very curious. But here we know it wasn't the flare up that did it. It was the combination of the flare-up and whatever this person did during the flare-up. The flare-up left Superman vulnerable to whatever this creature did to him.
Yeah, that's where his DNA and genetic makeup got mixed up and got kind of scrambled to the point where the Fortress doesn't recognize him anymore, to the point where he's not absorbing as much energy and he's not as strong and he's not rebounding as fast as he did before. Because we saw when he did the flare-ups before, he rebounded, within 24 hours he was back to normal. Well, right here we're seeing why it's not exactly that case anymore.
Agreed. You want to talk Cyborg?
Oh, God, yeah.
Jim, our next chat's going to be about Cyborg #1. David F. Walker is the writer. Ivan Rice is the penciler. Joe Prado, inker. Adriano Lucas is the colorist. Rob Lay, letterer. Rice, Prado, and Lucas on the cover. Tony Harris on the variant cover. Harvey Richards and Brian Cunningham are the editors. And Cyborg created by George Perez and Marv Wolfman. Apologies for any name butchery. Oh, this is so what I was hoping that it would be. Really, really loving Cyborg, what's happening with the book. What I love about it is I'm a tech junkie. I love tech. So if you give me a book where there's an opportunity to really explore a character who, is focused on tech like this one's letting you do, I'm on board. What it's done is it's taken Cyborg. Cyborg was created with the new Teen Titans, right? That was where that character originally unfolded. And at the time, it was super cool because it was new technology, like it can't possibly exist, that type of thing. One of the things I remember the writer mentioned in an interview was he was going to try to bring back that feeling again, where, we're in an age of the smartphone, the tablets. Like right now I'm using, I got for work a Surface Pro tablet, and I have... I bought myself a memory card for the Surface Pro that I use for when I download from Comixology my comics and stuff on there. So what I like about using the Surface Pro is, the fact that there's a bigger screen and all that. But it just shows we're getting technology that's getting thinner, bigger screens, better resolutions. We've got wearable technology. We've got Google creating Google Glass. We're in an era where over the next year, we're going to see a lot of companies rolling out virtual reality that we can buy for our homes. That used to be stuff that was the exclusive to movies like Lawnmower Man. Yeah. Or you'd go to a video arcade and you'd see these big, huge, humongous setups that you couldn't have in your home, right? Now we've got that tech, and it's going to be readily available on us. So tech has advanced so much where it's like, okay, how do we make that cool? Even in your Bond movies, they've shifted away from the gadget focus because so many of the gadgets exist now. That it's become more of a straight high-action spy thriller because of that. Cyborg, in this issue, they start to bring in an alien tech concept. And I like that because it starts to feel like Victor's got some kind of tech that is far beyond anything that Earth could produce right now. And it does things far beyond. He dies. He dies. I mean, Cyborg dies. And that was in the preview, I believe, where he actually died. But when that happened, he's regenerated and his arms were torn off. So much of him was destroyed, but then the unit regenerated him and gave him arms that aren't organic. They are tech, but they look organic.
Yeah.
And that mix, I love the visuals in this issue. It's Ivan Rice and Joe Prado. And if I don't know if I'm butchering their names. If I have, I've been doing it for years. And I want to acknowledge that because the art team on this is really spectacular. And it makes Cyborg's always been cool. This kicked it up a notch for me on the coolness factor. And that's important to do when you're doing a solo series with a new character. He's not a new character, but, Cyborg as a monthly solo title is not something that's been done to this level before, with Cyborg being a big player in the Justice League. Out of the starting gate, the preview, right into this, really made me excited. And I do encourage people, if you only read issue 1, you didn't read the preview, you have to read the preview, because there's parts of issue 1 that reference it heavily. And I don't know how you can get away with issue 1 without the preview, but it's free and it's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And the thing I loved about this was they show, kind of like that really cool 2-page panel where he's kind of talking, that throughout this whole, you have the inner dialogue of, Victor Stone just talking about how, when first time he died, his dad brought him back. And you see the bigger, bulkier armor that was from Justice League 1. Then the second time he died, he came back and it's a little bit sleeker. And now, once again, we're back to even a more streamlined look, but it's still just as much firepower, still just as much, Cyborg. And I like this. Again, you talk about changing heroes' looks and modifying of costumes. Every single time they've done a tweak with him, they've made it completely story arc related. Mm-hmm. And even going forward, I know we're going to get even more tweaks and changes just because of now the nature of what's going on here. This alien tech that we always thought was just apocalyptic. No, it's from, because you think about Apocalypse, they've conquered all these different races. They've done all this crazy stuff with all these other, beings and entities out there. So this is even an unknown factor that we didn't even think of, or at least I didn't even think about. Yeah, this is going to come from somebody else even. Some other alien race is going to come into play in this, and we're getting that in this story. And I was very excited and happy that there's going to be more to Victor than just what we always thought and what I always imagined. There's going to be other explorations as to where this armor is coming from, where the tech's coming from. More looks into him as a man, more looks into him and interaction with his father, with the people he knows. This is going to be a really cool Victor Stone story as well as a cool Cyborg book.
When on the page that you're referencing, when you see everything is now synced up and ready, all data readouts are being sent to your tablet, you see him, dealing with that holographic kind of computer screens. The holographic technology is here. These are things that, are starting to happen. Microsoft's doing a HoloLens. This is like available technology. What I love about his look now and why I love and you referenced the 3 changes that they've got on screen there. It's very today. Like Cyborg in that image right now looks very modern. Today it's not about big, bulky devices. It's about thinner, sleeker, clean lines. People are looking for that. Even on your smartphones, if you take a look at how they're evolving, they're taking away a lot of the edges from the phones. And the newer ones, especially when you see like those Samsung Galaxy and all that, it's very clean, very sleek. That's where they're going with all of this. So it's great to see with Vic Stone, when you take a look at that they're going in that style. It's a great design choice that they've done with him, that he looks like this cool modern tech.
Yeah.
And you want that with the character because he doesn't feel like, oh, wow, they're trying to take this character out of the closet, out of the woodwork, and bring him back in and make him feel like he's current, even though it's old tech. No, they're telling you, you don't get it. What you thought about him is completely not the whole story. This is what's really going on with him, and it's awesome. And Cyborg is the next generation of hero. And I like that. I want to feel like that with him. And it made this issue really exciting for me because, like you said, story-driven. It wasn't just a paint coating. It very much made the character, and it's what I love about it is it's very horror film too. Because he has had to deal with multiple changes to himself. And not 100% knowing what's going on with you is scary. And he doesn't know how long he has to live. He doesn't know how long this is going to keep him alive. He doesn't know what that means for him. And you can tell there's a fear factor in this for him. But yet he's a hero who keeps pressing on, keeps trying to find ways to interact with the world. He distances himself sometimes because of it, because he feels very alien and very foreign. But then there's other times where he's like, no, I need to connect. And I'm seeing that. And he starts to take those steps, but it's very hard for him. I love that journey for him.
Yeah.
Because it makes you go, oh, I think I got it bad. Look what this dude's facing. and there's something to having characters like that where they continue to pick themselves up in spite of it. And they have friends that care and people who are drawn to them. I love his relationship with Billy Batson, for example, in the Justice League books. But I love here that, he's got the doctor that he's working with who's clearly got some feelings for him and is trying to reach out to him, and he pushes her away at times, but then starts to soften. And I want that for the character. I want a supporting cast in this book that's more than just his dad. I want to see him try to build relationships, which is harder for him with what he is. And I like that because I think it's very contemporary today, what we see in a lot of our media with what people are going through, trying to, determine who they are and how they fit into society. I think Vic doing it in his own way with Cyborg it's a very contemporary story, and it's very cool.
Yeah, and again, as I said, this is a cool Victor Stone story.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely really need that with the Cyborg book. Cyborg does some cool stuff, and he's a great hero. But I really like the fact that we're getting the man behind the machine, and even his friend Sarah that you referenced, that she's known, and she even said at one point in time in the book, "I've known you as long as I've known any members of my family." So this is a long time friend. And who actually looks at Vic as something more. And I don't know if Vic is just too blind to see that she's got the connection, or if it's one of those things where he doesn't think anybody could love the monster that he is, or what is going on inside his brain. But someone just needs to give him a smack in the head and say, "Dude, right there, look, open your eyes." And I kind of like when we get stories like that in the comics, because regular everyday people do that constantly, where they've got that special person right there and they don't see it, and they just, for whatever reason, they got their blinders on, they don't see it. With him, you can kind of understand, because of all the craziness he goes through, he doesn't have a chance to sit back and look at the world as a regular person. So I'm happy to see they're going to address that, but they aren't going to let go of all the crazy aliens attacking, and because we're gonna get an alien invasion coming after him for the tech. That's gonna happen. And how does he deal with it? Who is gonna happen? The building of this support cast. We already know he's got one solid person, possibly a second one when he meets his old high school buddy, the other high school football player. And there's always going to be his dad and Dr. Moreau in the mix as well.
When she did that outburst, and she was talking about, he's right here in the room, are you forgetting that? Because they're all focused on the tests that they've run and what's happening to him and trying to determine that. They're more into the machine than the man. And she points that out, and she's like, enough already. He's right here, and you need to realize that. And when he's saying it's okay, she's like, no, you don't understand. I realize you're human. And, you need to realize that, too. You can't have this. And, she cares about him and sees what's happening to him. So there's multiple layers of what she's defending in that sequence that is really important, that shows that she really cares about the person underneath the armor. It reminded me of when I first started teaching, a couple years in, we started doing student-led conferences where, I had third graders, and they were coming in, and I would ask them questions to start having them talk about how their education was going. But I remember the kids would start, telling their piece, and I had to catch myself a couple of times because I was having a conversation with the parent, like the student wasn't there. And that's really bad. And I would catch myself and I would apologize to the student because I never wanted them to feel like they weren't a part of the discussion, because the whole point of student-led was to make them a part of the experience. And I think, as adults, we do that with kids sometimes where, no, they want to be talked to, not talked at or talked about. And, it's important to acknowledge those things. And I connected with that. I'm like, wow, this takes me so back to the days where we used to do that. And I had to catch myself and make sure that the student was aware. And anybody, like the kids appreciated the fact that you would acknowledge that. Victor appreciates the fact that she acknowledged that. And I love that that's very real world. It does speak to humanity, and it's great writing, because I'm like, wow, this takes me right back to work and experiences I've had there, and how I, grew in those experiences, and how I dealt with students and kids. And I love it's just such a real human emotion there. And what a great story out of the first issue.
Yeah, and again, this is couple of the just the art read-throughs, my art read-throughs, seeing the aliens, and just that, there was some really beautiful stuff. But there was one sequence that, and again, it's a little throwaway part of a really cool image that, when he first flares up and he really gets angry that they're ignoring him. The one nurse tries sticking him with the needle and the needle won't go in. And it's just is the first indication that that's not actually really human flesh or something else. And he flares up and he gets the full tech arms and everything's going on. And everyone's like, oh my God. You look at the back, like kind of the back corner of it. You see the nurse that was sticking with the needles got this, covering her mouth with her hands and kind of look of horror on her face. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of a thing that really made me go, man, that is awesome. The fact that you have these other three scientists who are very heavy into the lab rat kind of, he's not actually there, it's a machine, but you see a very human reaction to the sudden transformation, the sudden energy power up, machine power up. It's kind of one of it's that horror type of story being told where one half, where you actually get a glimpse of humanity looking at him go, because as we read the comic, we're like, oh, that's cool looking. But if we were actually in the room and a person who had what appeared to be normal human arms suddenly turned into these massive tech things with what looks to be a couple blasters on the end where his hands would be, we would freak out just like that lady did.
Especially if it's coming from anger.
Yeah.
Because he's like, even as a kid, it pissed me off. Could you both shut up for a second and just listen? He screamed that out, and they flipped around, and he's got that. But I love the dad's reaction. Dad's reaction is like, are you getting recordings of all this?
Yeah.
That, for him and his relationship with his father, I think is a real key there. I don't think his father doesn't care about him. I think his father, though, as a person, is so caught up in his work that he's disconnected. It's almost like I feel sorry for his father because his father misses a lot.
Yeah.
And it ultimately hurts their relationship because of the fact that the father just doesn't get it.
Yeah, and again, he goes then right back to being invisible. They go back to talking at it. And that same nurse who had that look of horror and shock on her face, she's the one who asks him, are you okay?
Right.
He's like, honestly, I don't know. But it's, again, I love the fact that it was that same nurse who one moment before had this look of horror and shock, but then she becomes a person again because she's not like the father and like the doctors where they're just so focused on the tech side and the mystery of what's going on. She actually sees the person.
Well, who should have asked that first?
His father.
Right.
But that's not the way the dad is. That's not the way the guy's wired. And it's got to stink, to have that kind of mindset. And I love the fact that at the very beginning of the book, he does say, my father loves me. I know he does. He just has a hard way of showing it. And it's always been, you get a lot of parents who end up doing this type of stuff, especially when you get like the old school, where the father would work, 50 hours, 60 hours a week, at the mill, and just, they didn't have time to have those personal, moments with the children because they're either working or they were sleeping, getting ready to go back to work. And you have those fathers, there's a lot of people with the distance to them. So that kind of rings true to humanity, but also you get just this intelligence level where he is kind of a lab rat. He is kind of experiment, and the dad can't really acknowledge or come to grips with the fact that this is his son. And I liked seeing this. Again, these are going to be some cool stories and some cool ways they can explore within this book.
Yeah. That's one of the things. The emotional moments, Cyborg is a super cool tech. And you've got to have those moments where you're like, with the arms, and when that all happened, that wowed me. And I love that wowed me because I'm very used to Cyborg as a character. He's been around, since the new Teen Titans series for 20 plus years? Well over 20 years, of the character. And yeah, I'm really dating myself now because I remember when that first issue was released and seeing that character on the cover for the first time. So, I'm not even close there. So, you've had this character that's been around since the 80s. And now all of a sudden, this character is, again, wowing me with his tech and making me go, ooh, that's neat, that's cool, that's something different, something unique. Getting to the emotional core of the character is what I'm going to love about this book. I want him and Sarah to have a relationship. I want that to go somewhere, and I want it to be successful because I want him to be successful. And even if it doesn't, I like that I care enough in the first issue to root for him in those categories because that means that they're hitting me with the character. I hope people are trying this book, because he's a character that they've, in the New 52, really tried to put Cyborg in a new place, and take him out of being a second-tier character and making him an A-list character. And the next phase to doing that really is having this book, having him in movies, and having him in Justice League and things like that. I hope it leads to a Cyborg movie. And he's a character that has a ton of potential if handled correctly. This is a good step. This really is a good step, because I was very, very into issue 1. Like, there's other titles where, like, I need a couple issues before I know if I'm on board for this one. The aliens hunting down this tech and saying, that they don't recognize it, but, and we're seeing, like, this quest for this tech being a thing, and learning more about it along the way and what it actually is that he's got a part of himself. And that not even being the whole story, because of the fact that Dad combined this with other technology to make this work. Cyborg's a unique puzzle.
Yeah.
That I think adds a lot of... You don't want to ever fully explain the character, because if you do, you lose the ability to be able to adapt and evolve him, like this book is doing, and it has been happening in the New 52. And I think you want to be able to continue down this path with him, where we're going to learn some new things that we never knew before, but it's not going to be the whole thing. There's still going to be mysteries there, and if they do that, and do that well, there's a great hook here.
Now here's my question for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's Sebastian Cardona. The guy who's introduced is within the protesters, and who Vic remembers from the football days. Now, I'm assuming he's not a throwaway. He may be part of, like, Vic's core team, or is he going to be a villain? Is he going to be one of the bad guys? Because they're introducing to me, I don't know if this has been a concept they've talked about before, with Cyborg, about the fact that the regular everyday people have this junk. Because you show the one guy where he's got the clamp for the hand, and it's he can't even tie his own shoe with it. And Vic's got this sleek, streamlined, armor. Part of me is wondering if they're going to do something where Vic's armor, Vic's tech gets shared with everyday people. And part of the reason Vic's a hero is because Vic is that kind of guy. What if the wrong person gets the Vic tech? What if the wrong person gets and if there's an evil version of Cyborg?
Valiant does a book called Exo-Man of War, and Exo-Man of War is it's almost like a hybrid of Cyborg and Iron Man in its concept. There's this alien armor, Shannara, I forget how to pronounce it, but it's a living organic tech. It's originally this Visigoth from the ancient past, winds up getting the armor, and it helps him to live. And what happens, how he's kidnapped, helps him to live to present day, through, like, sleep cycles and things like that, through this outer space journey. So he's brought from the far past, in Viking, Norse times and all that, to present day, and finding that his land, which is huge, has been obviously becoming whole new countries and things like that now. So he's come back to reclaim. His armor falls into the wrong hands. And because of that, even though it's connected to him, it develops a connection with this evil person. And it explores, what happens. Sure, it's great when it's in the right hands, but what happens when it's in the wrong hands and those type of things. I think we're going to see, because this tech isn't exclusive to Cyborg. Maybe the way that it's concocted uniquely for him it is, but the actual tech is out there, or elements of the tech is out there. So what does that mean when it does get into the wrong hands? We're going to see that in this book. I think that's going to be a big part of it. I don't know if it applies so much to this guy. I'm with you, because he was part of the protesters. So who knows where he really falls and what he's doing there, or if he's got, he's mentioned football grudges. That's not certainly enough to have him want to stab Cyborg in the back, I would think, other than the fact that would mean, why would he even be nice to him if you go on that end? But I don't see that being the driving factor there. I did like the fact that in a world where you've got people who've had severe injuries and they're given tools that aren't as functional as what he's dealing with, there would be some jealousy, rightfully so. Yeah. Because not only is he fully functional, but he's beyond functional. He's able to be a Justice Leaguer, going off and helping society and all that. Now, Can he relate to that guy? Yeah, to a certain extent, because in his case, he oftentimes feels like he's given up humanity. But it's also very humbling for him to have to look at this guy. Well, there's a point to this. It could, for as bad as this is, could be worse. And there's an interesting balance that has to be portrayed there. I was so glad they put that sequence in because I thought that was very smart.
Oh God, yeah. And it's, again, it's easy to say, yeah, you can just give them a lower level of your tech. Make it, so that he actually could, a cybernetic hand. But here's the thing, when you start getting into a level of tech that, where the cybernetic hand would be able to respond to respond to the mental commands, once you put that tech in the hands of regular everyday people, it will take the bad guys half a second to take it and modify it for darker purposes. Mm-hmm. If you've got tech that can respond to mental command, you now have a gun that can be fired mentally, a bomb that can be detonated mentally. You now have a whole nother level of problems. So they have to keep this level of tech away from these guys, away from everyday regular people, even though they probably wouldn't intentionally want to use it for bad purposes, but you can't put it out there. It's that whole, once you open the genie bottle, you can't put the genie back in. And I'm hoping that's going to be a whole nother again, these are all different storylines I can see, and I hope we're going to get out of this, out of the Cyborg story, because there's so much more than just a really cool Justice Leaguer who's got a lot of neat tech powers. And we're getting glimpses of these type of stories, and that's why I'm very excited for the future issues. Issue 1 has me right out the gate going, we got this and we can have this, and I'm thinking off page on stuff that could come down the line, and that's always a very plus for me.
And it's a unique book. That part I really like about it. It's a very unique book in the DC mythos. Let's end our discussions on this episode with another unique book. Let's talk about Prez, if we could. Prez issue 2.
Oh yeah. And we continue on with Prez number 2. The writer is Mark Russell, with pencil and cover artist Ben Caldwell, inker Mark Morales, with Sean Parsons, cover Jeremy Lawson, letterer Travis Lanham, assistant editor Brittany Holzherr, and editor Marie Javins. Wow, I butchered some names there. Apologies, because this is for me. Had we not been doing the podcast, I wouldn't have picked up this book.
Okay,
I'll flat out say the reason I did pick this up. If I was just a regular person reading comics, I wouldn't have picked up Prez. I would have waited to hear what somebody else said about it to maybe go back and get a trade on it or something like that. But I knew I had to pick it up for the series, and I'm reading it for. I approached this for kind of like, okay, what's going on here? Really, and part of my issue reason I'm saying I wouldn't have picked it up is because when I get with political comic books or political satirical comic books, I'm always very, very lenient and very hesitant and very just, I don't know if I want this, because a lot of time a writer will very easily let you know within a couple pages of the book, whether they're Democrat or Republican. You start seeing which side of the puzzle are they saying is the evil side, which side is the good side. And you get that a lot of times with these writers when they're creating, especially a satirical political commentary. But one thing I'm finding with Prez, and I'm definitely finding this through issue 2, he's not picking one side or the other. He's ripping everybody. He's going on the full offensive on pointing out all the little fractures and the fractures and the issues we have with our government, but not only our government, but also our society and how we look at different stuff. And that's something I'm like going, wow, this is really good. I'm glad I'm getting this. It is a different, feel for me. It's a different story being told. But I gotta say, I'm very, very happy that I'm picking this up, just because this isn't just what I thought it was going to be. This isn't just look at how bad this is. No, there's stories being told. There's, the mystery that's getting laid out. And I'm very curious to see how 3, 4, 5, how this grows and how this develops, and where these characters that they're starting to introduce to us, where they go. I'm getting a vested interest in Corndog Girl.
You know, it's funny. You were mentioning in the beginning of your commentary how this is a book, if we weren't doing the podcast, you wouldn't have tried out. I probably would have been in a similar boat, and let me explain why. I think if I wasn't doing this podcast, traditionally the kind of reading I've always done, I've always hailed from multiple companies, you know, some of my favorite top-tier characters. So, you know, that would be your Batmans, your Supermans. I'm a huge X-Men fan, Spider-Man, things like that, you know, that I would be following. But not even all of the top-tier characters in the company, because there's a certain time and financial budget. The time budget's a piece of the puzzle as well. My financial budget is larger now than it ever was when I was reading comics, especially with my new job. Problem is, though, with my new job, as is evidenced, you know, for people who listen to the podcast, you know that we used to be very consistent for a month. You could count on us pretty close to being weekly on the podcast. We're still close to, you know, we still do 3 to 4 episodes a month, so we're still in that ballpark. But there's sometimes a bigger delay between releases than have been usual, and that's because of the fact that my new job is, I'm not a teacher anymore. I'm an administrator. My job takes me well into summer. I had a week off in July. You know, and I have little breaks along the way in my job, so that's not me violining. I love my job. But there's more responsibilities, less time off. You, from when we started our podcast, your work responsibilities have changed drastically. So time for both of us is a factor that is a part of our budgetary process. It isn't just finances. And when you look at that, this would have been a title that I probably would have picked up just because it's intriguing to me. But it also would have been a title that probably would have wound up on the chopping block because I wouldn't have tried it because of the fact that my time budget wouldn't have let me get to it, because I would have been reading things. What I would have done is I would have had some strong DC, some strong Marvel. I would have had some lesser-known titles from each company that are characters that I've always been interested in. You know, a great example I would say is, you know, whenever Marvel does an Iron Fist book, I would have been picking that up. And, you know, characters like that. I love Iron Fist as a character I've always loved growing up. But And I would have done Dr. Fate, you know, and things like that. But my budget would have been filled up fast. And then I would have had some independent stuff, some things that fall outside of DC that are of interest and intrigue to me. Or I've had a lot of buzz. Where people, like Saga, a great book I'd throw out there. People are buzzing Saga. They should be buzzing Saga. Saga's awesome. Those type of titles would have been things that I would have been following. So I wouldn't have had time. I would have probably picked up a couple issues of this and been like, I'm just not getting to it. I'm going to need to drop it. Never having read it to be able to make that judgment, it would have just been a time budgetary issue. Because we do this podcast, I end up reading a lot of they fill that role. They fill those gaps of being the smaller, unique, lesser-known titles, you know, more of your indie-style books. Prez is really cool. And to your point about how issue 2 even more so, I enjoyed issue 1. I was still wrapping my head on where are they going with this. Issue 2, I so totally got it. And I'm with you. I'm glad that they've gone the route that it isn't one of those books, and I got to compliment the writer on this one. I don't feel like I know the writer's political stance either way, other than the fact that he's making satire of the whole shebang. And I prefer that myself because there's a lot to laugh at as both. You know, I tend to be, you know, I'm an educator, so I tend to vote certain ways because of that. But I tend to consider myself very open-minded to both parties. And I try to really listen to candidates and things. But I do agree with a lot of political satire that's out there when they take a look at how our current media has kind of made a mess of things in how we look at politics. And I love that this embraces that. And I think it's accessible if you aren't afraid to have a sense of humor about politics. Wherever you lie on this one, I think it's accessible to everybody as long as you have a sense of humor about our current political system. I don't feel like it's a slap to the face to Republicans, Democrats, Independents. I feel like it really looks at how the system and the fact that there are parties outside of the candidates that are pushing things, and there's this need to bargain and struggle to try and get what you want that plays such a factor in this. That's how she gets elected. I love that. Yeah. I love the fact that Ohio voted for her, and they were all vying for Ohio's vote, and they saw that Ohio was getting what Ohio wanted. I love that Ohio's the central point of this whole thing. That I got to admit, that geeked me out because we're from Ohio. And all of a sudden, all the other states started going, well, hey, if they used it for leverage, why don't we? And the time ran out.
Well, not only did the time run out, they the politicians lost track of what they were doing.
Right.
And more people were voting for Corn Dog Girl to try to, that's what they were going. They're using the Corn Dog Girl as kind of a holding pattern. Mm-hmm. So the more people who want more stuff, it's, they lost track of the fact that she had 25 votes. She just needed one more and she would have the majority. Well, Delaware jumps in saying, hey, we're no longer abstaining. We go Corn Dog Girl. Boom. And I love the fact that it just completely shut down. And, when Colorado, a landlocked state goes, we want a naval base. In Texas, we want 2 NASAs now. And they just kept throwing out these ridiculous claims, and they're trying to get the different stuff, and they're trying to go through. And I was just like, it was kind of it really made me chuckle with just, seeing them. And even like the politicians were, in a way acting like, and no offense to 13-year-old little girls, but they were acting like a bunch of 13-year-old little girls where they're like, hey, how you doing? And you can kind of just hear the tone of their voice as they're talking to each other, with, hey, what'd you get? Oh, I got this. Oh, I want that. It really just had me kind of cracking up about the state of politics, the state of the world that we're in. She goes to Paris Hilton Community College. I was like, man, that is great. And that was one I didn't notice again at first when they show her in college, and I'm looking at the scene, and it was on the art read through. I see that, I'm like, because they don't completely say Paris Hilton, they just have the RIS Hilton Community College. I'm like, oh, Paris Hilton, that is awesome. Again, really cool political statement, and just not only political statements, just cultural references and cultural statements, just where we are as a society. I could see us turning into this world very easily.
I like that the county hospital in the background too. It's a presentation of the Wayne Foundation or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't feel this is a part of our current DC universe, nor do I need it or want it to be. I'm glad it's kind of its own thing. If it winds up being in some strange way, I don't care. I just don't see it being the case, that's where they're going with this. But I love the fact that it's not afraid to touch on things like that. I love Farmaduke, again, a play off of Marmaduke. Carl, the robot, coming in there and almost smothering Dad, trying to deal with
he's the end-of-life bear. Yes. He likes some marijuana. That cracked me up. And then even he grabs him and he's like, Carl, no!
And the Dad, did you hear about the election? I won Ohio. Do you get to keep it? Dad is great because I really love getting to know. I'm starting to like Beth Ross a lot as a character, and I didn't know how I'd feel about this book. This was one of those where I don't want to say I was tentative on it. I was kind of like, I'm intrigued by the concept. I don't know, am I going to really like it, or am I just going to kind of go, it's a nice read. I don't know where we're going to go from here with this one. I find that I'm really enjoying this title. Issue 2. Issue 1, I liked it. I was kind of feeling it out still. Issue 2, I'm really in. I think what they're doing here is smart. It's interesting and intriguing. The talk she had with Dad was a big key factor for me because it took her from being what I was afraid of when they were going to use a younger girl for this one. I was afraid they were going to go to the route where, it was kind of like the route you were going with the 13-year-old teenage girl kind of bit, where you were kind of doing that commentary. No, this is a smarter kid. This is typically girls are the ones that, as whatever age they are, they tend to be older than we are, more mature than we are, than guys. I mean, it's just a fact. And I would say that that's very true of my experiences growing up. Most of the girls that I've enjoyed talking to and have become some of my best friends from elementary school straight on through high school and all that I really admired a lot. I think of Sally.
Yeah.
We have a mutual friend who we went to high school with. She was always that one that, like, she was our age, but felt so much older in maturity than we did. And when you talk to her, she was, like, wise beyond our years, if that makes sense. That's kind of how I look at this girl. She's smart. She's very into today's current culture, and that is prevalent there. But when you see her with Dad, you kind of see, no, this is somebody who's like, they're smart. They're young, but they're smart. And she's still reads as being a younger girl than she is, but than we are, I should say. But she reads as that's not the whole story with her. And I find her very interesting as a character as it goes on. I like that we've seen stories with her in the preview that clearly take place after this. But we're now getting to see, how does she wind up in office? How does she wind up being this particular person? And how do you deal with the surprise of the fact that, guess what? We elected her.
Yeah. And it's interesting you bring up the father, because we just talked about Cyborg, where you have this father who is very distant and not attached into his son, to this guy who, on his deathbed, is trying to make his daughter feel good and trying to, he's being that really cool father as he's dying. These are the parting words that he's giving to her about how, she's not a nobody. She's something amazing. She's someone amazing. And just how, and I love just how he went through that whole process where he's like, you are one of only 8 billion brains in the known universe, and how she's just this amazing, wonderful person. And I love just how he's like, I didn't get a long run, but hey, you know what? I got you. And that's just, it was these really cool, those awesome father, moments that, and it's kind of neat that we went from talking about the one dad who, well, is, stone, and you got this guy who on his deathbed is trying to make his, daughter feel important and special, and just, has that passing. And it was just that really just great moment where, when he has that final, just, this is it, and he goes and he's gone. And I was like, wow, that right there was a very powerful story, very powerful scenes, and then you go right from that to the ridiculous of these politicians. And it was a really cool layout of how you went from this somber, amazing moment to the other stuff. And I was like, man, that's cool balance.
I really love the rate this product on Carl too. That seems to be on everything now. Rate this product. When we flesh into the candidates kind of vying for power. And when I'm vying for power, it's more, hey, if you give me your vote, if you give me your support, what am I going to get in exchange? And they're getting all of these things in exchange, these promises for their votes, as a way to, change the tally in their direction, which ultimately backfires on everybody. But it's so true. It's part of the hard part about elections nowadays. And I'll share a little bit of my own politics in this one. I do feel like in the past few elections, without laying where I am one way or another, I feel like my frustration as a voter comes from the fact that I feel like I vote against ideas instead of for candidates, if that makes sense. And part of my problem is, that there are outside forces and outside entities that are pushing the direction of candidates. So you're not always just voting for a singular person. You're voting for who's supporting them too. And their ideologies and what they're pushing. So it's very hard to vote for. You'll watch debates. You'll see candidates present themselves. It's very hard to take anybody at face value. And I do think that's a hard part about our politics nowadays. It's hard to look at them as individuals. I do feel like I've made good choices over the years that have reflected me. I don't get really caught up on other people having different choices than what I've had, if that makes sense. I tend to believe our system works at its best. Choice is good. And people thinking through their choices and being able to make choices that are the best for them is the way that our political system should work. But I've always felt like I've voted with kind of my heart and where I believe that I haven't had buyer's remorse. Let me put it to you that way on any candidate I've voted for. And I'm not talking president when I'm talking about in general on most of the people I've voted for. The problem is there are lots of times where I voted for a candidate with the intention of voting against the other because I didn't like something about the other. And I wish there were more situations where I could say I was voting for candidates. And that's, again, I'm not talking presidency. I'm talking across the board when I go to the polls. And I think a lot of that's due to a lot of the satire that's been brought about in Prez. I think it talks about some very real problems that we have right now in our political system. And I like that. I like this kind of commentary. I like that that's in our... Because I think it's going to make me when I look at stuff like that, a better voter. I will be more critical when I vote. And satire can do that. Satire can actually make you smarter and make you think through things. I don't think we can take television at face value when it comes to voting for elections. I try to use a lot of sources for my information. I try to really think through, what is best, not only for me and my family, what's best for my career. I work in a career where we educate kids, and I've got to think about what is going to be the best for all of those kids. That doesn't have to say that I hit a home run every time when I vote. I don't. I'll tell you right now. But I do think when I've gone to the polls, I've tried to do it with the best intent. It's a very interesting thing. And this book, really, it's funny how this little story has made me think through, like when November rolls around, I am going to vote differently in November because of a book like this. Not drastically, but it has evolved me, and started to, and it makes me think through things. And I like stuff like that. I like to think I grow every year as a person. That's part of the fun of being alive. And I do think that this story has helped with some of that. If anything, I think this story will make me a better listener when I'm listening to what candidates are actually saying, but also in trying to find out real information about the candidate, their background, and what they're really all about, and who's supporting them.
Cleveland recently hosted the Republican debates, and at work the next day, because I work with a lot of very political type people, and so they're talking about they asked me, "Did you watch the debates?" And I looked at them without betting, and I go, "No, I watched wrestling. It's more honest." Yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I'm going to wait to see the thin the herd, see what happens, but it's. Yeah, it's funny because you're talking about how a book like this can get you thinking about politics, and there's been a lot of I'm the same way with a lot of comedians. Sometimes you get some who throughout you get some slam dunks and just some pop, just some lob pitches that you can hit for a home run with some of these candidates. You want to rip on, Trump's hair. You want to rip on George Bush saying stupid stuff. You want to rip on. What's his name? Potato Guy. You want to rip on that. You can have so many different fun, easy pop fly politics jokes that you could make. But you get some of these comedians who actually really look and break down. And those are some of the comedians that I like to see. And I like how they start looking at different stuff and they start breaking things down. And there is some, out there that you're just like, you get done listening to a set, you've been laughing, and you stop and go, wow, he or she, they're right. And that's kind of messed up there, and it gets you thinking. And I like the fact that, you have those sources. You have stuff like this book. You've got comedians. You got various, there's so much out there that can say, and it's part of it political satire, some of it's political commentary, some of it's political entertainment. Whatever you want to go with, you have these different variations on it. And I really dig seeing, and I dig those where we have these options out there. And this is definitely going to be one of those part of the puzzle for me. And I'm glad you brought that up, because this is something that does, on the surface, you get one story, but then you start looking underneath the story, you start looking more to the the why and the whatnot behind this book. There's going to be some cool stuff coming down, and I'm actually looking forward to getting delving deeper into this title.
Well, the whole thing with how does Do Texas sound and things like that is that's all stuff that stands out for me, and I'm kind of like, wow. I mean, how does Tunasa sound, with the Texas and all that type of thing, and throwing a football stadium? They're all bargaining for these things that they think are going to be great for them. And in truth, they really, there's no guarantee that they are. And I love that part of the story. I just think that the story is very rich because of the fact that they go to these places and they talk about how, we get greedy. Because of the fact that, hey, the vote means a lot. It's control of the country, and it's control of a direction for the country. But they are also driving the ship with this bargaining that's going on. And that part I really love. I love seeing the switch, because we go from the very beginning, Corndog Ross was very far down on the polls. Yeah. It's 16, 19, 14, and one abstaining.
Yeah. Well, again, they weren't paying attention. And I love that, they're so focused on what they wanted. And even, in the one boardroom where they're laying out the plan, what they're going to do, and they've got the taco drones dropping off the food, which does kind of have me chuckling. But you've got in the background Madden 2036 electoral, results. So again, it's pop cultural references. A video game, what was a very popular video game, is now actually part of the political strategy and part of the political scene.
We're from the Church of Wormology. I loved how the religious end gets into it, and Vironetics instead of Dianetics, and I like that it's not just political satire; it's also how religion gets involved in politics. And I'm a big believer that religion. I am all for people who are very into their religion. I'm not a big. I'm very religiously tolerant. I'm not a big one on there's one right religion, or if people aren't religious at all. I totally respect that too. I tend to kind of lay that way because I'm not the most religious fellow anymore. So I tend to be more open-minded on that end. I do think, though, whenever religion gets involved in politics, we have huge problems. Because it's not – there's a reason why there's separation of church and state, and I'm a big believer in that. I do believe that where religion, I think, helps – and it doesn't matter if it's religion, however you get them, I think it's important that our politicians have a moral code that they live by. And I think that religion at its best – or just family values at their best, whatever those are, they drive that, and they drive that they're people of good character that we vote for. So I'm not against somebody voicing their religion as far as part of their politics, so we get an idea of, no, that person's got a moral character or a moral code that they live by. I wouldn't care if the person was an atheist. That I was voting, as long as they have some form of moral code. You know what I mean? That you can identify. I need to know this person's basically a good person that I'm voting in, or has good qualities about them. It's the sad part is I think our politicians need to have a certain amount of dirt as well. I don't think they need to be perfect people. I think you can't have that and be a part of politics as a part of the nature. But it is interesting how this book addresses all of that in satire, too. It's a very interesting book. And it makes, it really made me think about myself. I'm like, well, who am I when it comes to politics? And what do I believe when it comes to politics? And I don't know that I've totally, you can hear me as I'm kind of even thinking through it. I don't know that I've totally pinned that down. I don't know that's a bad thing. I think it's important to continue to learn about yourself in what you look for in politics. And I think this book does a great job of making me question even myself in a good way. I think that's part of the fun of, I think, really strong fiction. I think does a really good job when it skirts these lines that makes you kind of start questioning yourself in the process. It's a very smart book.
Oh, big time. Yeah, and again, it's one of those things where I'm curious to see where it's going to go, what they're going to do with this, because this is just the very beginning of this. And we've had some great political, some great social commentary. Now, where did this go? Where does this go from there? Because you've got this 19-year-old, kid who is the president, and she can't really be controlled. She doesn't have, she doesn't owe favors to anybody. You can't really embarrass her. So there's no fear of humiliation. And she's not one of those, like how they said, the one is easy to manipulate because he wants to be beloved. The other one, I control because he owes me. We have a president now who doesn't owe any favors, who does not fear humiliation. That's a risk I simply can't accept. And I love this, how that is where this is going to be an unknown it factor for these people. And who knows, maybe this will somehow get this society back to what it should be, not what it currently is.
Delaware, who has been the holdout all along, ends up voting for and tips it over the edge so he has enough votes to win, which wasn't the intention, but it leads to total and utter chaos. And I love Preston Rickard and how he's been brought into all this and used. It's another voice for her. She needs a father figure now because her father hasn't been in the case. I hope he winds up being the father figure that he seems to be in his presentation here. In that he'll be the mature voice as an advisor that she really needs to go forward. I do find that here's the thing. I care about her enough that I want the people surrounding her to be good.
And here's the thing. I'm going to disagree with something you just said there.
Go ahead.
With Delaware voted for Ross, I think that was 100% intentional. The entire time Delaware's been abstaining and abstaining and abstaining. I think they're working with, the vice president, to have this happen.
Oh, okay.
They were sitting back, and I think they were just waiting for their shot, waiting for her to get 25. Once she had 25, they're like, bam, they jumped on it.
Do you think
I think they were in on the mix to get her in power. There was this force that was behind the scene to get her in power. I think Delaware's in on it.
Cool. I don't know that I see that. I don't see that as wrong though. I looked at it as Delaware was completely indifferent and jumped in, but your presentation there, I don't disagree with. I'm like, that could be the case. There's nothing, here's the thing. There's nothing in my reading that disputes what you're saying. And I actually like that story idea. So if that's where they're going with this, I'm in. I think that's cool. Here's what I like about the book. I'm not looking to pin down my own kind of ideas on where that's coming from right now. I want to go along for the ride and I want to see it. So if that's where they're going with this, I love the idea. I think it's cool. I think you're right. That's a possibility that's on the table, and I think it's a strong one. After you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's kind of that makes sense, and that's kind of a cool idea too. I think the reason why I was thinking Delaware was just voting that way. I thought that it was meant to be the ambivalent voice to politics that's out there as well, because they seem to be in this book going out of their way to try and represent all of it. So I thought that's what they were going for there. And I could have been reading too much into it when I thought that way. So maybe it is exactly what you're saying, and I could see that very much after you're saying it. But that's where I was thinking. I'm like, oh, this is, they're painting this to be the voice of ambivalence, and Delaware doesn't really realize what they're doing when they're doing that, and threw it over their head.
To be honest, it could be that as well. Yeah. If that was the case, I would be okay with that as well, because a lot of times that does happen. Mm-hmm.
I'm very open with this book. Like, I think this is a book that has a lot of possibilities and direction. Where are you at on it? Like, I'm very, with issue 2, issue 1, I enjoyed it. Issue 2, I loved it. And there's a big distinction between the two. Where are you at?
Oh, I'm very solid with this book now. It's not on the level of the Superman and the Detective, Superman Detective Comics, Action Comics, Secret Six, Batgirl now. There's a lot of titles out there that I'm like, oh my God, but I am really digging Prez. This is a book where I'm very happy I'm getting this. And
is this a monthly or a mini?
Well, I'm going to hope it's a monthly.
I do too. Yeah, I don't actually. Well, no, here's the thing for me. I don't want this to be a mini. Like, I'm into it. I mean, I guess
I'm hoping it's a monthly. I don't know. If it's a mini.
I don't compare it to those books, and I'm not saying you're wrong for doing it because it's so different. That's what I like about it. Like, it's not. Everything you said about those books you're rattling off, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm with you. Yay, great books and all that. I like that. After reading all those books, I've got this. I mean, it's not. It's not a superhero light book. It's its own well-done, unique piece that's just telling a different kind of story. And that's what I'm liking about post-convergence, that the divergence, whatever you want to call this era that we're in right now, the DCU. They're realizing that, hey, we want to offer a wider landscape of titles. Offer some variety that's just not there currently. This is something they don't have in their reading list right now. And I love it. I love it because it's all-encompassing satire, makes it so inviting. And it's working for me really well, agreeing that it's not my usual. I love the superhero books. I'm into all that stuff. I like this. This fits what I like about Vertigo. It's outside the box.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
It's very well done outside the box. I hope it's successful. I hope people are giving this a shot, especially now with the. I think you mentioning the fact that we just had the debates. If you were having a whole bunch of, because I watched portions of the debates after the fact. The next morning we were out at administrative retreat, and we were out at Peak and Peak in New York, And we did zip lining and adventure trails and all kinds of stuff like that. And then afterwards, we went out together, and the debates were on, but we were in a place where you couldn't hear them. So the next morning, I watched like some of the highlights, but that's all the spin. You know what I mean? The thing I loved about this fits the spin, which is what everything is now. It's a lot more spin than substance, and this embraces that, and it's a lot of fun. And I just hope this book's successful. I really do, because it's something unique. It's a unique voice in DC's pull list. And I think if you have a sense of humor about politics in general, you'll find something to like. I'd love people's reactions. You can totally disagree, and anything we talk about on this episode, you can certainly disagree with anything we say or agree. Even if you agree, sometimes you may like a book that we like for different reasons. I'd love to hear what those are. That's what the voicemail line's for. And actually, with that, let's jump to a couple voicemails for this week, and we'll wrap up.
Watch out, Batman. This could be tricky.
Hey guys, it's Anthony, and I want to thank you for the long discussion on Identity Crisis that you guys did with my question last week. That was awesome, and gave me some insight into that piece. So thanks again, and I really, really enjoyed the podcast still, which is awesome. So with that said, I have two questions for you today. I've been looking at my Judge Dredd Batman collection. I'm really enjoying that. So I wanted to know what your guys' thoughts on the Batman Judge Dredd crossovers. And I'm a huge Judge Dredd fan, and I've been collecting the complete collections, and I have 1 through 8. I'm still missing 9 and 10. These are these big collections of the original Judge Dredd. They're like, excuse me, not omnibus type stuff, but more, they're thick collections. They're like maybe 400 pages a piece. I have the first 8 volumes. They're pretty great. They include a lot of Brian Holland's artwork and stuff like that. And it's pretty awesome. They include, from his first appearance on to, wherever I'm at in 8, and include, stories like the Apocalypse War and the first Judge Death story and all that. And I hope to get 9 and 10 here pretty quick. I wanted to know what your guys' opinion on that crossover and Judge Dredd is in general, and even that great movie Dredd from 2012. So there you go. My other question is, let me ask you guys this, and I don't know, does it seem like to me that DC is misunderstood? DC is, I see a lot of people bash DC so much. They say stuff like DC is, characters are not relatable. Superman's a Mary Sue, which is not true. Characters are overpowered compared to Marvel. They're not related. Not trying to bash Marvel. I just see a lot of movie fans and stuff just bash DC for no reason, and they just say stuff like that without actually understanding the characters. Do you guys see that, or is that just me? It seems like DC's more attacked than Marvel is in some cases, and sometimes I have to defend them. Like, have you, look at this work, look at this one. They say DC's too childlike, and I'm like, have you ever read Dark Knight Returns, Killing Joke, that type of stuff? I'm wondering if you see that, or am I just being negative and all that? So, again, thanks for the great work, and I hope to watch the podcast. And I wanted to know your insight on that rather controversial question. So, thanks. Bye.
I don't know that I think it's exclusive to DC. And actually, let's deal with the controversial question first, just because it's so fresh in my head, and then we'll jump back to Judge Dredd. I don't know that that's exclusive to DC. Like when Marvel made the decision with Spider-Man, that Miles Morales, with the merger of the universes, with the whole, however Secret Wars is going to play out, Miles is going to be the New York Spider-Man, but they're still having Peter Parker, and Peter Parker's still going to be doing things as Spider-Man from what I'm reading. So I'm like, well, we're getting both, right? So what's the problem? And I actually like both characters a lot. I think there is a tendency on the internet nowadays to jump the gun, make assumptions, and then those assumptions become fact in people's mind. And usually those assumptions come from people who either are never intending on reading the actual product or have made those assumptions with a very base knowledge of it, and those tend to float around forever, and people tend to hold on to those as, well, that's what it's like now, and they haven't actually read the product. If you take a look at how many people are actually reading comics now, I think it's not representative of the amount of people that comment on comics, if that makes sense, if you take a look at the comic numbers. So I think there's a lot of that going on, where people tend to do that. And I think that's part of the problem we have nowadays with the net. I think there is a larger culture of people that read things and try things first and actually give good commentary on it. But yeah, what you're saying is very true. I don't think it's exclusive to DC, though. I think we as DC fans probably notice it more. and it stings more. I would be curious to, like, I like Marvel. I'm not anti-Marvel by any stretch. I didn't choose to do a DC podcast because, I'm so not Marvel. I actually like all of comics. It was more of, at the time, I am a big DC fan. I've always been. There's, Batman being one of my biggest draws at DC, and always has been. But I could easily say the same thing about the X-Men. As far as being equally as much of a draw to me over at Marvel's end. And I could have very easily done a Marvel podcast. So I don't think that's the case. Jim, with you, you tend to read a lot of the banter on the internet too, but I know you avoid it more. Probably more than I do. What is your thought? Do you think DC gets unfairly more bashed than Marvel? How does that look to you?
I've actually thought that a lot of times.
Okay.
And I think, the one comment you made, though, is probably could be because I am a DC fan. I'm a little bit more hypersensitive to comments on the bashing on DC. But I have noticed, I don't know, there's been times when I've stopped, just reading stuff just because I'm like, really? Yeah. And it's kept me away from part of the reason I'm not as heavy into the news groups, not as heavy into the, forum chats and discussions like that is because I started reading more and more. It seemed like DC was getting a bad rap, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to keep reading and read what I enjoy, talk about what I like, and I'm just going to leave it at that and let everybody else go away. And so I completely see what he's saying. I've saw that, but I don't know really if there's probably Marvel people out there who are saying the exact same thing about them. I definitely do know on the movie side of it, DC gets a lot, more criticism than the Marvel side does. I think, but I will say Marvel's done some really great movies. So I understand why people kind of give leeways, but, I think, stuff like the Green Lantern movie, I think got bashed far worse than what actually it should have been. Was it a perfect movie? No. But was it the absolute worst thing ever created? Of course not. And, same thing goes, but same thing on the other side of the Daredevil. So they got heavily bashed, and they announced Ben Affleck as Batman. And even I was kind of on the, I don't know about this. What's going to happen here? But, he is getting such, heavy attack and such heavy just criticism against him that I'm like, I can't, I'm not going to bash the guy just because I don't want to be associated with the people who are doing just that heavy attack on the DC side of it. So there is, I think, a lot of the criticism, the upfront criticism where, the knee-jerk reaction without anything to back it up. And, the internet is a great spot for that, where a lot of times the internet just throws out whatever because you have that anonymity where you're, fanboy guy number 293. You're not actually a person. You're not actually a name. You're just this anonymous entity, blip of energy that can throw out whatever you want to say about people or say about products or comics and whatnot, anything. And because of that anonymity, people tend to go towards the darker side of their personality. People tend to go more towards the negative and go on the attack as opposed to people standing up saying, hey, this isn't half bad.
Well, here's the thing. If you take a look in recent years, where's DC had most of their exposure? Television. They've done a lot more with television than Marvel has. Marvel's done a lot more with film than DC has. What Marvel's done with film, to your point, has been great. And I do think people look to Marvel film and they go, wow, look at all those great movies. And they should. They're great films. I want them to be successful. I like Marvel stuff. So, it's, when successful Marvel films is a win-win for me because I want to see those movies. I want to enjoy them. When Marvel's doing successful comic events and comic storylines, it's good for me because I can't read everything Marvel. I wish I could. That's a time issue. It's not a quality issue. So I tend to look for the buzz a lot and rely heavily on the buzz that fans are going. Do I think it's easier to find positive Marvel buzz? I think so, but that could be because I'm looking for it. On the DC end, I don't need to because I read it, so I make, similar to you, I make my own opinions and judgments. I do think that I tend to notice the negative comments more because they tend to surprise me, just because I'm like, are you really reading the product I am and you're making these comments? But I do find, like, if I'll look at our Facebook group, for example, there's a lot of great people on there, and our group keeps growing. And that means that there's a lot of fans that are really just enjoying talking about this product. I don't think it's not a hater community. So the fact that people are joining it, I think, as a sample group, you could take a look at that and go, well, that's a really good sign where people are at as far as the comic product goes for them. The film end is really I've always felt it's an unfair comparison because the output and what Marvel's done when they brought most of their properties in-house, but those aren't perfect either. I'm talking about the stuff that Marvel Studios is putting out are pretty spectacular. The ones that have been done by outside studios have probably gotten their harshest criticism, and I don't always agree with those criticisms. Like, I'll go on record as saying I actually liked both Fantastic Four movies. I haven't seen the new one yet. I intend to. I want to give it a fair shot. I'm hoping I enjoy it. I don't know. I do tend to shy away from commentary on the film right now because I've already seen some people bashing it. And I'm like, well, I don't want to walk in with that thought process. I just want to give it my own fair assessment either way. But, the X-Men films I really liked. I thought the third one of the first batch was good. I thought the two before it were great, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. The Wolverine film, I loved the Wolverine. I thought the first Wolverine film, and I'm an easy sell on that one because I thought it was a good movie. And I really enjoyed it. I don't think it deserves the bashing that it gets. I think they took some liberties that people maybe took some issue with, and I'm like, I kind of get that. But I really like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine.
Yeah.
So, as long as you got him clawing up people and stuff in a film, you got me. I do think they could have made some different choices in that first Wolverine film, but I liked it. I mean, I didn't think it was a bad movie. I walked out there feeling like, wow, it was fun to see a good Wolverine movie. But the Wolverine I thought was far better. Especially the director's cut. They released a director's cut of it. I thought that was far better than the first movie that came out. And I think they listened to fans and they got to that point because of it. I think Marvel's really, and that's not Marvel Studios, but I do think Marvel Studios has done a great job on all of their movies because of the interconnectivity.
Yes.
And the fact they interconnected it with S.H.I.E.L.D. was a good move. I like what they're doing with their TV series and how they're connecting them with their film universe. I don't think DC needs to follow suit. I think they need to find their own voice. I think in TV they've done it. I think the partnerships they've made have been really good. I love DC TV right now. I enjoyed it coming up to this. Smallville was great. I thought Birds of Prey was a good series. I was sad when that was canceled because I enjoyed that series quite a bit. Gotham is great. Arrow's great. I don't need all of those to be completely interconnected. I really don't. The ones that are, I think, are doing it really well. I don't need the other ones forced in there in order to make it work, if that makes sense. On the film end, they haven't had as much exposure. But I thought the Batman Begins series, Batman Begins, The Dark Knight Rises, were some of the best movies I've seen. Man of Steel, I really liked. I think it gets I know it has a darker tone, and I get people who are like that. They don't like that in their Superman. Okay, I get it. But I thought that was Superman. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a very contemporary take on Superman in the way I'm enjoying the comics right now with it. So I liked Man of Steel. So I don't know. I don't think they've had as many films, and I think that's a very fair criticism. I think they were behind. I've heard before people are complaining that they were behind the eight ball on that. Yeah, but look at that TV output we're getting. So I think we're getting just as much great multimedia, and their direct-to-video releases and stuff like that are spectacular. I think we're getting great multimedia output from both companies. I do think DC does get a little more unfairly bashed on their media presence. And I think their video games have been great. The Batman series of games is really great. I liked the Scribblenauts game. The Lego games that they've had have been really good so far. I'd like to see more. I think Marvel can step up their game a little bit in their video game market. But the games that I've played, I've enjoyed. I don't know. I don't know that it's all... I wouldn't say it's as drastic as people often make it to be. Let me put it to you that way. Yes. I do think the commentary tends to skew a little bit more in favor of Marvel, but not to the point where I'm like, oh, those Marvel people. I really don't feel that way. Because I think a majority of comic fans are cross, they tend to be more of a hybrid. And they like DC, they like Marvel, they like independence, they like, the whole shebang. So I don't think it really is as big as they're saying. I do think we're more sensitive to it because we read more DC. And I think that if you read more DC, I think you're going to be more sensitive to the negative comments because it's more of it's somebody insulting your hobby. And if that's a majority of your hobby, you're going to take that more personally. And I get that because I do sometimes feel that way, but I don't know that it's true.
You tend to take it more personal. Yeah, mm-hmm. I agree with you on that one because I know a lot of times with me at work, especially, people will, kind of roll their eyes at me when, with any geek chat or anything like that. And, sometimes I intentionally take it a little bit farther than what, is required, just because I know it annoys certain people. And I do it just to annoy them, and other times I accidentally just keep, people at work love asking me any general geek related question. And sometimes, I can give them the short answer, but sometimes I go full geek, and, it happens, but you see, I see a lot of times just people looking down at me because I watch wrestling and because I read comic books. Oh, I must not be as smart as they are. Well, guess what? I am. I'm actually probably smarter than you, but that's just the way I've seen it. So I'm sometimes I am a little bit hypercritical of criticism, especially when directed at something that I enjoy.
I mean, I love video games and stuff like that. I think we're all in those boats. I love to read in general, not just comics. I love to read novels and things. I think the things we get passionate about, I'm a film buff too. I think when you're passionate about certain hobbies and you have a tendency to overtalk them. I'm passionate about tech. I mean, my job is director of technology for my district. So I tend to read a lot of journals on what's coming up with tech, how tech's used with students, but I love new tech. But I do think I've found that I'm not platform agnostic. Like, I have a PlayStation 3 and a PlayStation 4, but I don't sit there and go, oh, you Xbox gamers or you Nintendo gamers. I actually am excited. It's again, the financial and time issue. Would I have an Xbox and a Wii U if I had the time? Yeah. In all honesty, I think they're great systems. I think the games they're putting out are great. Same thing with comics. I would read more of them. There's movies that I want to see that I don't have the time to be able to see. There's TV shows that I want to watch that people love that I don't have the time to be able to watch. I don't think I have to own, like, I'm only a PlayStation fanboy or something like that. No, video games. I'm a video game fanboy. I like competition in it. I like healthy competition. I like healthy competition in comics. I think it provides opportunities for creators. I think it pushes creators. I think it pushes companies. I like the landscape being... I love that previews is a phone book. I think that's great. I think the same thing with video games. I think the same thing with film. We never want a day where our companies win. So criticism when people are trying something new to garner attention... you don't want them to ever phone it in. And as fans, we need to be real cognizant of that. We want them to try new things. We want them to try ways to excite us. Whether you're loving or hating the Jim Gordon Batman story, what's great about it is they're trying things, and they're trying to find new ways to tell new stories in that world with the characters that we know and love. Not everything's going to be 100% a home run for you. But what you're digging, you really do it a service if you get the word out that, hey, this is good and here's why. And I think that's how we're based here. I don't think it's in a negative response to, excuse me, there's so much bashing out there. I don't feel that that's the case anymore. I think when we started, there was more of that. I think it's a lot more balanced now, but I don't think it's the case. I don't think the DC's any more bashed than Marvel. I think you see as many people make snarky comments about Marvel as you do about DC. I do.
It's funny as you're talking. A thought popped in my head. It's kind of like voting for Corn Dog Girl because you want to get a stadium.
Yes,
and they're not taking a look at what exactly they're saying. You're not looking at the big picture. If you sit there and criticize every time a company tries something new or something different, you'll never get anything new or different. You'll always just get the same old story every single time. Professional wrestling has that sometimes, where they'll try a character that's a little bit different than the main picture, and if he doesn't really succeed, they always just go back to the tried and true, like Daniel Bryan. If you don't know wrestling, sorry, I'm going to go a little geek here. Looks nothing like what is the quote-unquote traditional wrestler. And because of that, because of the energy and everything he brought to the table, it was the fans who really got him, where he's going. Upper management, They weren't really thinking. They were thinking, attention, but not the big picture for him. It was the fans constantly, chanting yes, and the fans backing him that got him to, the main events, that got him to, his title runs, and that got him just that level that he accomplished was because of the fan base. Had the fan base not been so behind him, he wouldn't be where he's at, and we wouldn't have gotten such a great wrestler and such some really cool stories that came out of it.
Yeah, I do think what ends up happening is the comments that we reference a lot of times are from a very small population. And typically they aren't reading the same things that we are. I don't think it's exclusive to DC, though. I think Marvel gets it, too. I think the films have helped Marvel just because film tends to be a wider spread audience. I think that films have put Marvel in a different place as far as the general public goes, and I think people tend to reference them more. I'm going to be very curious to see what DC's landscape looks like after Batman Superman.
Yeah.
There's a lot of buzz behind that film. And Suicide Squad, I'm still going to go on the record as saying I think Suicide Squad's going to be a sleeper hit. I think
I'm going to concur with you on that one because I'm seeing more and more people talking about this thing, seeing more and more excitement going towards it.
I think it's going to be DC's Guardians of the Galaxy. I really do. I think it's going to be one of those where people are going to see it and like it. I hope. I'm prepared to be very wrong on that one, but I think it's going to be that one where you're going to get a general public who go to see that just because of the crazy, colorful characters, and also the fact that you've got Joker and Batman appearing in it. Judge Dredd. Let's talk about Judge Dredd.
Oh, yeah.
I knew there was another topic there. My history with Judge Dredd's a very interesting one. I don't have, obviously, he's got a major Judge Dredd history and really has followed the character. I've read the crossovers that he's talking about, the Batman Judge Dredd, and I really quite liked them. As I have with any crossovers. A lot of times the DC crossovers, like DC's done Top Cow crossovers, I wasn't always reading or didn't have exposure to every character when they've done those. I like crossovers, even when they're not characters that I've ever read before. Judge Dredd falls in the category of, I remember growing up, a lot of comics I would get, as I mentioned on the show, I'd had my monthly favorites, but there was very few titles. If I was getting 5 books a month, that was a lot. A lot of times I would get a subscription. It was always Batman. If I could get Batman or Detective or Brave and the Bold, I was getting those. And then maybe another book or two if I happened to be at the store. And sometimes comics came in those 3-packs, those plastic 3-packs, where you would get like 3 comics and you never knew what was in the middle.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? There's some middle book, and sometimes you try to bend the plastic just enough to see what that middle book may be, so you can pick it up. I don't know. I'm sure you probably did the same thing if you ever got comics that way. But I used to get a lot of comics through the 3-pack, and there's usually one book that drew me to it, and the other books were kind of books I didn't normally read, but that's how I got to know characters. Judge Dredd was interesting because my friend Jeff Kovach, I remember he was older than me, and he read Judge Dredd and knew the character Judge Dredd and had him at his house. And I didn't see Jeff a whole lot, but when I did, I don't know how much of a collection of Judge Dredd he actually had, but I remember a couple times being over at his house, and he had a much more unique collection of comics. He was reading things that I'd never heard of before. He was reading something called Hernandez Brothers, and then was reading Judge Dredd. And Judge Dredd was the one that I picked up and I was paging through at his house, just because probably at the time he was the most superhero-like out of the batch. And I read through, or paged through, I should say, because I didn't have a chance to really sit down and read them. I paged through a couple of issues of his Judge Dredd. And then my exposure to him has been crossovers. Any of the Judge Dredd crossovers with DC certainly were the ones that I read. I saw the one Stallone movie, the Judge Dredd Stallone movie. I wanted to see the most recent one that was released, and I haven't seen that one. And it's one, there was a time issue. It was an issue of quality. I've heard mixed reviews off of that one, but I could care less. I tend to see most comic movies anyway. This is just one, time-wise, it escaped me. That's the only reason why I didn't see it. That's my knowledge of Judge Dredd. And the crossovers, I always like the character. I love the concept. I don't have a big background in the character, though. So that's where I'm at with the character. Like what I've seen, can't really speak to it. Actually, you're referencing omnibuses and things like that you've gotten. I like the character enough, I'd be interested in seeking some of that stuff out. And if anybody if you want to shoot me a message with some recommended starting points for the character, as far as an easy way to ease in to get to know the character's background, I would certainly welcome that, because I would read more of Judge Dredd. I like the character enough.
Yeah, I saw the Stallone movie. That's my sole exposure to Dredd. Mm-hmm. So, I'm just sitting here quietly nodding my head with you, but I've never read a Judge Dredd comic or never read any of the crossovers or any of that. I've only seen that one movie.
Batman Judge Dredd was great. I mean, the comic crossovers was great. I mean, I really enjoyed that stuff. You know, that was really cool material, but that was really my main exposure in the comics world to him, and it was good stuff. I would love... I liked the Stallone flick. I remember enjoying it back in the day. I don't know how true it is to the comics, though. And I think the newer Dredd movie was supposed to be more true to the comics, if I remember correctly. I don't know if that's the case either. I'm not a good judge on that end. What I've been exposed to, I've enjoyed. So I don't know why I haven't reached out for more. It's been time. It's really, honestly, I do know why. It's time. That's the only reason why I haven't had the time to do it. I've liked what I've read with the character enough that I'm interested, but that's really what the issue's been. That's really been the only thing. It's, in most cases with me, if I like something, I want to seek it out. I just don't, if I don't have the time, that's really what keeps me from it. Do you remember liking the Stallone film or not liking it, or where were you at on that one? Do you remember? Because it was a while ago.
Oh, it was a while ago, and it was a Stallone movie. I remember thinking, oh, okay, it's a Stallone movie. Uh-huh. The concept I thought was kind of interesting, but I don't know. It never got me to the point where I was like, man, I think I'm going to go look up some Judge Dredd comics and look at the original source. You know, it was just something that I was like, okay. You know, and so when the second movie, when they did the relaunch, the other movie, that was another one of those things where I wasn't like, oh my God, I got to see this version now. I was like, if I could find the time to do it, I'd watch the movie, and then it was out of the theaters, like, okay. I'm sure I'll see it when it comes on HBO Showtime, and if it's been on HBO Showtime, I haven't actually watched it, so I don't know.
I will say my exposure to the comics, you know, with the crossovers, were enough that it made me interested enough for the fact that he's mentioned his love for the character, and actually his commentary actually gets me excited too. I like when people are passionate enough to call in, what is your thoughts on this character? Because I really like this character. That gets me excited.
Yeah.
You know, when somebody takes the time to say that they like a character enough and they're passionate enough, that perks my interest. So he's got me probably more interested than anything to read more Judge Dredd.
Hey guys, it's Donnie Sarlo here. I just want to let you know you might get a few dozen calls from my doctor. Her name is Dr. Ma Bluebird. Okay? I don't know what happened. I think she's in love with me. I gave her your guys' number. She's totally unprofessional. I went in there for a checkup. I don't know. She's been nonstop. I told her I moved. I gave her your number. It was the first one that popped in my head. She wants me to go on a double date or something with her sister. I don't know. All right. I just want to give you a heads up, and all right, I'll tell you saw me. Bye.
Actually, I wish that we'd gotten this phone message sooner, because you and I have been analyzing those phone calls, and we stopped receiving them because we straightened things out. What happened was, remember that part where we thought it was, this is your daughter calling? Well, Jim and I slowed that down, and we listened to it carefully, and is Donnie there? Is actually what she was saying, and it was very strange. So we referenced her to the Taylor Network of Podcasts. Look for Donnie Salvo, and hopefully she got to you, and sorry. That was funny.
Outstanding.
She really hasn't called. I mean, like, we really haven't. We had like that weird, insane bank of like 80. I literally, you know, they had, I shouldn't say 80, but it literally, honestly, I will say it's been 50 phone calls we got from her, and in succession. And I think she finally figured out her mistake, because there's been nothing. That was a funny sequence just for myself to pull them up and like, I know. This is your daughter calling. And I do think that's what ended up being the case with Dr. Bluebird. But that will go down in the show annals as being somebody I'm really going to miss her.
I miss her.
Yeah, I'm going through withdrawal.
Holy caffeine!
I want to remind everyone about our show voicemail line. It's 1-440-388-4434, or drnorge on Skype. We always have that as part of our show notes. It's also up on our website as a part of the About Us section. It's easy to get to that, and we love having you part of the show, so please consider calling in with any of your thoughts on comics in general. Speaking of website, it's ragingbullets.com. That's where you're going to find out news about where the show is headed, when the show is going to be released, what we're going to be talking about. That does feed into our Twitter, so if you're a Twitter fan, go ahead and follow us that way. We have a Facebook page, which is a fan page, and what we do, we post our episodes as soon as they go up on there. we have an amazing Facebook group community. And that Facebook group community is just, honestly, it's one of my favorite locations to go to. The community itself has taken it so far beyond what we could have ever hoped for. We share it with Infinite Comics. It's a great community to find out what's going on at DC, what people are thinking about what's going on at DC. Also pop culture and video games and movies and all of that in general. They post links to trailers, to blogs. They do regular chats. It's just such a great community and group to be a part of. And I just want to shout out everybody there because it's their group. It really is their community. We're just lucky enough to be able to tag down as being a part of it because they took it far beyond anything that we could. So I want to shout the great people over there out. Remember, if you've never been a part of a Facebook group before, if you shied away from it because of the amount of emails you get, you can actually turn off and control the settings through Facebook on how you receive updates from that group. You can go completely radio silent where you won't get any of that material. I would encourage you to do that, though, and not shy away from the group because it is a group that means that much to me that I want to shout out the quality of the people in the community there. And I like that it's gone so far beyond our podcast, and it is due to those great people. Feel free to use that group to shout out anything that you, if you're a member, that is a part of you, blogs, podcasts, everything like that. I do consider that to be a fan community, a global fan community, and want people to be able to find and connect with whatever they want to through it. It's an open environment. People always ask kindly that first, can I promote something that I'm doing on there? Sure, go for it. Let people reach out and talk about it. I think that's great. That's how we got, word of mouth is how, people retweet about us all the time. They post about us on Facebook and different groups. And honestly, it's the best thing you can do for a podcast or a blog that you're enjoying. Let people know it's out there. We don't have advertising budgets in these things. We don't have budgets in these things. Our sponsor is kind enough in what they do. They help really take care of some of our costs that are associated each month with putting out a podcast. So we rely heavily on you to get the word out about us. And I thank you for if you told just one person about our podcast, thank you for doing it. Because that's how we get the word out. So that's the great thing about being a part of a community. It's that type of aspect of it. We are on Google+. I have a PlayStation Network account. We have personal pages on all of the social media out there. So it's easy to find us and connect with us. Feel free to add us however is easiest for you. Once again, we are sponsored by DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. James, what's going on at DCBService.com?
Bundles, bundles, bundles. Some great deals on some of our returning favorites, 50% off. But a special bundle this week is the Vertigo bundle. 75% off. Yes, 75%. All 4 new Vertigo issues for only $4.21.
Over at InStockTrades.com, I want to shout out again the 50% off deals they have for this week. Infinite Crisis, Fight for the Multiverse, 50% off, only $7.49. I mentioned the Power Man Iron Fist Epic Collection trade paperback, 50% off, only $19.99. Teen Titans trade paperback, Volume 1, Blinded by the Light, 50% off, only $8.49. This is a great way to be able to pick up some of this material. The Green Lantern Omnibus, Volume 2 by Jeff Johns, 42% off, only $57.99. They have things like, I'm looking at Superman trade paperback Volume 5 is one of the new releases, Under Fire, 42% off, only $9.85. It's great if you've been missing some of this material and you want to get caught up, or if you want that bound copy of something that's a favorite storyline of yours, head over to InStockTrades.com, do a search for it, and make sure to check out the amazing deals they offer you. It's a great way to get a hold of them and to support a show sponsor. They sponsor not only us, but a lot of podcasts out there, and they do such a great job of supporting the podcast community. I want to thank DCB Service and InStockTrades.com for being with us for so long. We're heading into basically the road to our 10-year anniversary coming up in March, and they've been with us a long time and are really greatly appreciated. So I just want to shout them out. Speaking of our next episode, Jim, we were talking about what do we want to do next week, and obviously there's a ton of comics that we want to talk about. We're going to take a little sidestep, though, and talk about you've finally gotten, I should say, Justice League Gods and Monsters, and you haven't had a chance to watch it yet. But we're going to talk about that next week. That's going to be, I want to talk about this one because it's basically an Elseworlds animated movie. And I want to talk about it and see your thoughts, Jim, on what you think about it, and were they successful? Did they make a compelling universe that we want to talk about? So we will do that next week. We will see you then.
Bye.
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You-Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.